Chapter 1661. Furthermore, although the strength of the brothers had already reached the peak of the heavenly layer, in terms of prestige and power, they were still not enough. Even their actions were not enough. Then, to help the Dharma Supreme deal with the big clans and hasten the end of the catastrophe? That was even more impossible. No matter what the Dharma Supreme's current motive was or what his stance was, his identity as the successor of the heavenly demon had already defined him. Not to mention, after the big clans were annihilated, there was still the final battle with the Dharma Supreme. To help the enemy deal with their own allies and then fight the enemy, wasn't that foolish? All in all, they were in a dilemma. In such a situation, what should we do? If Chu Yang wasn't beside him, even he himself wouldn't believe that the words "what should we do" would actually come out of Diwu Qingrou's mouth. Almost the wisest person in the world would actually ask the words "what should we do" to someone else. Mo Qinji laughed bitterly. The best way to stop an action is to target the weakness. If the Dharma Supreme still has any misgivings or weaknesses, then no matter what, we can use targeted strategies to stop him. But now he doesn't care about anything. This is the real problem that is hard to solve. As the saying goes, one can be strong without desires. It's hard to deal with. Chu Yang stared at the endless stream of corpses floating over the river surface. He said softly, "Duxing and the rest are now trying to contact the law enforcement officers to clarify the facts and set things right. However, the Dharma Supreme is the longest-serving Dharma Supreme in the history of law enforcement officers. He is the most capable and has the highest prestige. He is also the one who is the most united. For the time being, no one will listen to us at all. This is also a headache. Not only that. In fact, it's not just Duxing and the rest. As long as anyone speaks ill of the Dharma Supreme, the law enforcement officers will immediately fight you to the death. Playing with your life." Mo Qinji laughed bitterly. "Even if you produce evidence, you will be forcefully overthrown. The law enforcement officers will not allow anyone to speak ill of the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme's orders are the supreme orders. Once he says it, the law will follow. Orders will be strictly enforced. Nothing more than that." Diwu Qingrou frowned and then laughed bitterly again. He sighed. "I have to admit that one person. To be able to have such prestige, one can really be considered to have reached the peak of one's life. I don't know if there will be a day when I will be like the Dharma Supreme. I believe that this achievement is definitely the dream of any person in power. For the Dharma Supreme to be able to achieve what he has today, it is also due to his painstaking efforts over the past 10,000 years. It is truly not easy to come by. I really don't understand why he would undergo such a shocking change. Why would he suddenly go berserk? Even if he was demonized, there should still be a process, right? This kind of madness without any warning is really inconceivable." There was admiration in Diwu Qingrou's voice, but there was also a sigh. "You are a beautiful woman, but why did you become a thief?" Indeed, if one had reached the Dharma Supreme's level in life, one would still be able to do such a thing. It was tantamount to personally overturning all of his previous achievements, turning him from a hero and leader of mankind into a sinner of mankind. Such a change. This was an extremely unthinkable thing, and no one with half a brain would do such a thing. Yet the Dharma Supreme had done it. This person, who was almost the wisest and most far-sighted person in the world, had done the most unwise thing. Using the most unredeemable and hysterical method. Diwu Qingrou's voice was mixed with deep regret and melancholy. Not everyone could achieve such an achievement. Since ancient times, there had only been one such Dharma Supreme among the trillions of people. Diwu Qingrou had never been one to belittle himself, but he knew that even if he was given 10,000 years, he might not be able to achieve what the Dharma Supreme had achieved today. Yet, it was this person who had done such a self-destructive thing. Wasn't it such a pity? Chu Yang pondered for a moment before he said, "Brother Diwu, since we are all sitting together to discuss matters today, it would seem a little inappropriate of me to hide some things from you. To tell you the truth, the true identity of the Dharma Supreme is actually somewhat related to your Diwu clan. Don't go on." Diwu Qingrou raised his hand decisively to stop Chu Yang from going on. There was a trace of heartfelt pain in his expression. He said sadly, "I know what you want to say. I have long guessed it, just that I didn't want to make it clear." He heaved a long sigh. "Back in the Northwest, when the Dharma Supreme sent law enforcement officers to assist me, I already had a feeling. All along I had been guessing. Then I finally confirmed that the Dharma Supreme must be related to my Diwu clan, and the relationship is not shallow. I believe that even if he is not an ancestor or elder of the Diwu clan, he must be a friend or brother of the Diwu clan's ancestor, the kind of brother that he can entrust his life to. Diwu Qingro smiled bitterly and looked at Chu Yang and Imo Tianji. For example, your brother Jia. Chu Yang and Imo Tianji looked at each other, their hearts full of heartfelt admiration. He was indeed Diwu Qingro. His brain was really frightening. No one had mentioned anything to him, but he could point out this point acutely. The only question is that the Dharma Supreme's name is Dongfang Badeo. He shouldn't be an ancestor of the Diwu clan. According to my investigation, he doesn't seem to have much contact with any ancestor of the Diwu clan. As for the deeper level, if he is really an ancestor of the Diwu clan, then his schemes or whatever he has done, I don't want to know, not at all. If he is not an ancestor of the Diwu clan and is a brother or friend of an ancestor, I also don't want to know. Diwu Qingro was silent for a moment. Then he said softly, the Dharma Supreme is now standing on the opposite side of the entire human race, and has dragged all the heroes into the great melting pot that is the martial world. As a human, I am already destined not to be able to coexist with him in this world. Since that is the case, then don't ruin the image in my heart anymore. Besides, I can also pretend to be confused and reject that sense of guilt. Imo Tianji and Chu Yang clapped their hands and smiled at the same time. Brother Diwu, you are indeed honest enough. Diwu Qingro's statement was undoubtedly an evasion. However, his evasion now was because of his insistence that his heart belonged to the human race. Diwu Qingro could do anything for his own purpose, but he would never be as crazy as the Dharma Supreme. Diwu Qingro's smile was a little bitter. I'm not being honest. To a large extent, I am doing this to protect myself and the new Diwu clan. If the Dharma Supreme is really related to the Diwu clan, then the Diwu clan would have been razed to the ground at the first moment. Previously, when all the clans were attacking, only the attack on the Diwu clan was delayed by a beat. I already felt that there was something wrong. Fortunately, we were still attacked later on. If not for the attack at midnight, I may not have had the chance to come out of the Yi clan alive. The people of the big clans are already in a state of panic now. Any bit of suspicion is enough to make them take action. It is also very hard to blame them for this. Chu Yang pondered and said, just now I thought for a long time. If we want to stop the Dharma Supreme's crazy actions, perhaps there is only one way, and that is to start from the Dharma Supreme himself. Imo Tianji and Diwu Qingro smiled bitterly at the same time. How could they not have thought of the idea that Chu Yang had thought of? However, the crux of the problem was that they could not find any trace of the Dharma Supreme at all, so how could they start from the Dharma Supreme himself? As long as the Dharma Supreme is killed, the law enforcement officers will be leaderless and the catastrophe may be averted. As Chu Yang spoke, he also smiled bitterly and rejected this idea himself. So I know I have thought too simply. Even if we kill the Dharma Supreme, it will not work. May even. Imo Tianji smiled bitterly. It is not a possibility, it will definitely happen. If we kill the Dharma Supreme at this juncture, then this order will become the Dharma Supreme's last wish. Even if the law enforcement officers collectively put their lives on the line, they will also do their best to complete it. Moreover, without the highest restriction of the Dharma Supreme, the law enforcement officers will truly become the source of disaster and chaos. It is bound to cause endless trouble. Even if it lasts for hundreds or thousands of years, that is also not impossible. A crazy plan formulated by such a super-wise person is simply unsolvable. It won't work, it won't work. Suddenly, the eyes of the three lit up at the same time. They said at the same time, perhaps there is another way we can try. Then the three sighed at the same time. It is just that the big clans may not agree. Obviously, the three of them had thought of the same idea. If we can let the big clans gather all their strength, abandon their existing foundations, and gather all their manpower in one place, completely ignoring everything else and letting them do as they please, just waiting for the final battle of the Tianding flourishing meeting, then we can avoid a considerable amount of losses. However, in that case, the big clan's foundations will be completely abandoned, and many of their family members will also have to be sacrificed. The place where they gather can be fine, but the other foundations are destined to be destroyed. They will definitely not do that. The three of them smiled bitterly at the same time at their wits' end. They actually had a way, but there was no way to put it to use. Chu Yang was silent for a moment. Then he said, right now, the Dharma Supreme is relying on the prestige that he has accumulated over 10,000 years and unparalleled wisdom to start this world-ending battle. If we want to stop it directly, I'm afraid it is completely impossible. But no matter what, we can't just stand by and do nothing. Even if it's a futile effort, we still have to try our best. If we can reduce the harm by even a little bit, then that's a little bit. This is the only thing we can do at the moment. Imo Tianji and Diwu Qingru trembled inexplicably. Both of them were top-notch wise people who were used to looking at the big picture. In their eyes, sacrifice in the ordinary sense was nothing more than that. Sacrificing 1,000 people and sacrificing 10,000 people were all sacrifices. It was just a number. To them there was almost no difference. However, Chu Yang's words gave rise to a strange feeling in the hearts of both of them. Perhaps this was why Chu Yang was the Tribulation Sword Master and why he was different from the rest. Was it heroism? No, definitely not. This was just a kind of aura that Chu Yang himself had. Knowing that it was impossible but still doing it. Chapter 1662. Just now, Diwu Qingru and Emo Qingji's minds were constantly circling, calculating the Dharma Supreme's crazy move this time, thinking about how to break the situation and how to break the plan. The more they thought about it, the more helpless they were. Because no matter what they did, the result was exactly what the Dharma Supreme wanted to see. Any reaction would only speed up the process of the apocalypse. Therefore, the two of them were already somewhat depressed, even lost. This was perhaps the common problem of people who were good at scheming and scheming. Once they realized that the other party's strategy could not break the situation, they would think of giving up. This round was destined to be a loss. They could just take it back in the next round. As for the current round, they would not waste any more resources on it. Because it was already destined to be a futile effort. What was the point of wasting that effort and resources? The two of them had actually already decided to give up in their hearts. However, Chu Yang appeared out of nowhere at this time and said so rudely, "Even if it's a futile effort, we have to try hard. If we can reduce the harm by a little bit, it's a little bit." This sentence did not have any aura or sharpness, but it showed the most primitive and fundamental persistence as a human. When facing an enemy that was too strong and could not be matched at all, so what? It was just a battle. Even if they knew that they would die, even if they knew that they would lose, so what? They could only fight. Demons wreaked havoc on the human world and the human world withered. Even if they knew that there was little hope, they still had to try hard. Even if they could not reverse the situation and the outcome was already decided, they still had to try their best, do everything possible, use all their abilities, effort and efforts to reduce the degree of damage. That was all. Without Emo Qingji and Diwu Qingru, Chu Yang could still devise strategies. Without the two of them, Chu Yang could still win 1,000 miles away. Without a military advisor, Chu Yang was still Chu Yang. Otherwise, where would Minister Chu come from? Emo Qingji and Diwu Qingru's positions were military advisors. Wise men. But Chu Yang took care of both. I'm a wise man and a warrior. I can be a military advisor and a vanguard. I'm a marshal and a soldier at the same time. When facing an enemy, a warrior could only respond in a warrior's way. That was to fight. No matter what the final outcome was. The most important thing was to fight with all their might. Okay. Emo Qingji and Diwu Qingru said in unison. Since they had made up, there was no need to hesitate. There was no need to hesitate. Chu Yang made a prompt decision, and decided on the next course of action. Originally, he planned to let the two think tanks come up with some ideas and formulate some targeted strategies. However, he didn't expect that the two wise men would give up. Now only his big bro was left. Brother Diwu, after you go back this time, you'll have to face the consequences. Immediately inform the major families of the current situation, and then propose a way to gather as many troops as possible. Chu Yang pondered for a moment. Let's proceed according to the previous plan. As for what they plan to do, it's up to them. Anyway, the fate of the big clans has already been decided. There's still a chance of survival if they fight. That is, the great clans deserve to be destroyed. Diwu Qingru nodded to show that he understood. Tianji, after you return, immediately arrange for everyone to split up and try their best. Let's see if we can find the Dharma Supreme. Chu Yang's face was somewhat gloomy. This was something that could not be helped. Even though they knew that the chances of finding the Dharma Supreme were extremely slim, they still had to try their best to find him, hoping for a fluke. Just in case. It was because they wanted to eliminate this calamity. There was only one way. However, everyone knew about this method but no one said it out loud. Because it was impossible. The only way was for the Dharma Supreme to give the order to give up on this mission. However, even if they found the Dharma Supreme and captured him, would he give such an order? It was absolutely impossible. Now, there were actually more and more corpses in the ancestral spirit river. On the surface of the river, swarms of flies were attracted by the increasingly strong smell of blood. In addition, there were also countless mosquitoes and other insects. No one knew where these things came from. Once the smell of blood spread out, they instantly swarmed over. A faint stench permeated the entire river. I'll deal with Zhang's body here. Otherwise, I'm afraid a world-ending plague will start from this river. The life river of the double heavens can't be turned into a poisonous river. If that happens, I'm afraid there will be no one in the entire double heavens. Mo Qinji and Diwu Qingro nodded solemnly. In fact, Chu Yang's statement was still rather conservative. With such a large number of corpses, if no one dealt with them, the consequences would really be unimaginable. Once the plague spread, it would be like a prairie fire. Especially now that the source of the plague was in the ancestral spirit river, the consequences would definitely be more far-reaching. Tianji, remember to inform Elder Wu and Le and ask them to come over and help. After all, they are the experts in this aspect. I'll be in charge of gathering the corpses and they'll be in charge of the follow-up work. Also, those from the big clans in the capital city who can be mobilized should all join in. When Chu Yang finished speaking, he let out a long roar and soared into the air, rushing straight down the river. Mo Qinji and Diwu Qingro cupped their hands and bade farewell. One on the left and one on the right, they quickly disappeared into the distance. Chu Yang let out a loud shout. The river water within a radius of 100 miles churned almost simultaneously. The countless floating corpses in the river were pulled out of the river water one after another as if they were pulled by an invisible hand. They fell pitter-patter onto the river bank. In just a moment they had already piled up into a mountain of corpses. Chu Yang didn't delay. Spreading his arms, he quickly flew upstream along the river. He had just cleared a good 50 miles of the river, but he had only flown less than 70 miles when another dense group of floating corpses came over. The river water flowed down at an extremely fast speed to begin with. Now that a large number of corpses had left downstream, the river flowed even faster. The corpses upstream naturally sped up and rushed down. Chu Yang moved again. Another large pile of corpses stood tall on the bank. Then he continued to move forward as if he was flying. Not far away there were already large piles of corpses piled up high. In just a short time, there were already 20 to 30 piles of corpses standing tall. Chu Yang let out a long sigh. Just in this short period of time, the number of corpses that had passed through his hands had already exceeded 10,000. Looking over, the river water was still surging, and there were still countless corpses floating over. Downstream, Wu Jueqing and Chu Le had also arrived. From downstream they started to deal with the corpses. Puffs of decaying poison mixed with invisible poison were released. Piles of corpses began to melt and disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. Putrid smells rose into the sky and were immediately blown away by the strong wind. The poison of rotting corpses was the source of the plague in the first place. It was also the essence of the plague virus extracted from a large number of rotting corpses. Under Wu Jueqing's unparalleled skill in using poison, he had turned the poison of rotting corpses into the best medicine to eliminate the plague. The legendary fighting poison with poison. The real version of the scene. The most ideal was that they would never have to worry about a lack of raw materials and could recycle them over and over again. Further downstream, there were already people who had begun to salvage the corpses and cremate them. Those were the people from the big clans who had begun to move. Those with a discerning eye could also see the potential seriousness of the matter now. More and more people joined in. In the end, it was no longer limited to the people from the big clans. Many benevolent and righteous martial artists also joined in. And these martial artists who joined in actually avoided death due to their unintentional acts of righteousness. Because the law enforcement officers could lay their hands on anyone, but to these people who were dealing with the corpses. Even if they were from the big clans, they wouldn't touch them. Such a strange action made the hearts of Mo Tianji and the others even heavier. Because this was definitely an order from the Dharma Supreme. As Chu Yang moved forward, he sped up the process of dealing with the corpses. At the same time, he constantly used his divine senses to detect the source of the battle. Along the way, he had already discovered no less than 7 or 8 battlefields where battles had taken place. He also cleaned them up one by one. But there were basically no living people left in these battlefields. If he wanted to find traces of the higher-ups of the law enforcement officers, he directly disappeared without a trace. His journey was fleeting and he had already traveled thousands of miles. He moved forward rapidly. Finally, he heard the faint sounds of battle coming from ahead. Since there were still battles, it meant that there were living people or traces of the higher-ups of the law enforcement officers. Chu Yang was energized. He instantly increased his speed and leaped forward like a gust of wind. He saw that there were 2 groups of people fighting each other by the river in front of him. The fight was extremely intense. On one side there were experts from the law enforcement officers. As for the other side, everyone was dressed in black. They were from the Yi clan. Stop. Chu Yang descended from the sky. It's the Tribulation Sword Master. Retreat. At the command of the leader of the law enforcement officers, everyone actually abandoned their opponents and hurriedly retreated without looking back. Chu Yang was furious. He flew high up in the air and kicked one of them. Then he waved his hands wildly and hit the last few people. They staggered and fell down. However, the people in front of him had already entered the forest. The branches swayed for a while and there was no more movement. Where is the Dharma Supreme now? Chu Yang didn't have time to exchange pleasantries with those from the Yi clan whom he had saved. He lifted up the law enforcement officer at his feet and asked hurriedly, "Are you looking for the Dharma Supreme?" A strange smile appeared on that law enforcement officer's face. He said, "Come with me." As he spoke, a trace of black blood suddenly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Then his body slowly went limp. He actually chose to sever his own heart meridians at the first moment. He was already completely dead. There was still an extremely strange smile on his face. A few hoarse and tragic laughs sounded. The other law enforcement officers who were restrained by Chu Yang also severed their own heart meridians and died at the same time. Poof! Chu Yang let go of his hand. The corpses fell to the ground and rolled for a while. They looked up at the sky with a strange smile on their faces. Their eyes, which were like dead fish, were wide open and emitted a faint color. These law enforcement officers ran away the moment they saw Chu Yang and committed suicide the moment they were caught. They were actually so straightforward. But it was this kind of straightforwardness that made Chu Yang feel an indescribable fear. Yes, it was fear. Even Chu Yang felt fear. If every law enforcement officer was like this, then how could this catastrophe be avoided? Because no matter how many high-level law enforcement officers you found, you wouldn't be able to find the Dharma Supreme by following the clues. If the source wasn't eliminated, the catastrophe would not be averted. Chapter 1663. Thank you, Tribulation Sword Master, for saving our lives. The leading expert of the Yi clan was already covered in wounds. He looked at Chu Yang with a complicated gaze. These people were the members of the Yi clan who had been stationed outside. More than 300 of them had rushed back. But there were less than 30 of them left after this battle. In fact, they would have become part of the pile of corpses by the riverside if Chu Yang hadn't arrived in time. In fact, none of them would have been spared. More than 10 days ago, they received the order to rush back to deal with the Tribulation Sword Master. But this time, at the critical moment of life and death, they were saved by the Tribulation Sword Master. This was really... Although he already knew about the huge changes in this incident on the way here, when it really came down to it, he still had mixed feelings. You should go back quickly. If you see any corpses along the way, dispose of them if you can. Bury them if you can. Don't throw the corpses into the river. You must remember this. Chu Yang waved his hand and shot away without looking back. Along the way they went through several fights. However, all the law enforcement officers immediately dispersed when they saw Chu Yang. They absolutely didn't want to fight with Chu Yang head-on. They changed places and continued to attack. As for those who didn't run away or were caught by Chu Yang, they also went on their way. The road to the netherworld. Chu Yang had killed many law enforcement officers along the way. But in the face of the world, it was still a drop in the bucket. He was really at his wit's end. When he really did it, it was really troublesome. Unexpectedly, there was a gust of wind behind him. It was Wu Jueqing, his white robe fluttering in the air. Most of the corpses have been disposed of. But those that aren't in sight are beyond our reach. Wu Jueqing sighed. Such madness. The Dharma Supreme is definitely crazy. How could he do it? I really don't know what he's thinking. Chu Le's face was pale. She bent over and vomited. She was still a little girl. Although her talent and intelligence were far superior to ordinary people, when she saw so many corpses and had to deal with them personally, Chu Le was already holding on. It would have been better if she hadn't seen Chu Yang. But the moment she saw her brother here, a sense of dependence welled up in her heart. She couldn't suppress the feeling of disgust in her heart, and immediately vomited. Chu Yang patted Chu Le's back considerately. At the same time he said to Wu Jueqing, "But since things have already developed to this stage, we can only go with the flow. Senior Wu is a capable person, so I'll have to trouble you. Rob the world. This is something that cannot be shirked from in the first place. Even though it's already a thing of the past, my heart is still the same," said Wu Jueqing. Then he looked at Chu Le with pity. Wu Jueqing said, "Let this old man handle this matter on his own." Downstream, there were already members of the Yi clan who were using the corpse decomposing powder to dispose of the corpses. Let Le rest for a while. She's still a little girl after all. Even without her help, it won't take too much time. No? I want to go. Chu Lu said stubbornly. Although the little girl's body was weak from vomiting and she was leaning on Chu Yang's body, she still insisted on participating in the operation. Senior, I think we should let Lure go too. Chu Yang's heart ached a little, but he still said resolutely, we're all children of the martial world. We'll have to face these things sooner or later. Now that we're at the juncture of the demonic tribulation, any bit of help is needed. I believe that Lure's help is definitely not to be ignored. Wu Jueqing sighed. As Chu Lure's teacher, how could he not know his disciple's ability? But he really couldn't bear to let this little girl face such a cruel reality too much. Although the Dharma Supreme has made up his mind to cleanse the entire heavenly layer, his original intention is probably not to destroy the entire heavenly layer. The main reason why he gave the order to only kill people and not dispose of the corpses is probably to use this method to tie us down. Now, it seems that this move of his is very effective. Chu Yang said, because of this move, we have no choice but to do as he says. Otherwise, the plague will rise within 3 days at the latest. Once the plague appears, it may sweep through the entire continent within a few days. If the entire heavenly layer is engulfed in a large-scale plague, then that will be the real doomsday for mankind. Then everything will really be over. Yes, it's precisely because we thought of this that it's especially suffocating. There was fury and regret in Wu Jueqing's eyes. The reason why he gathered most of the corpses in this ancestral spirit river is probably because of this. It's easier for us to clean up. This bastard has really thought of everything. I don't think I'm as intelligent as him either. He's really fucking worthy of being Tribulation's brains back then. I can't help but admire him. Both of them sighed at the same time. According to the latest news, the big clans have already sent out orders. On one hand, the big clans are stopping the law enforcement officers from doing evil. On the other hand, they are calling for the world to dispose of the corpses properly. On the other hand, the law enforcement officers are not making things difficult for those who dispose of the corpses. This news undoubtedly exposed the Dharma Supreme's motive even more. But even though the Dharma Supreme's motive has been completely exposed, he doesn't care about it at all. This is no longer a conspiracy but an open conspiracy. An open conspiracy that we have no choice but to accept. Chu Yang smashed his fist on the ground. One had to admit that the Dharma Supreme's open intentions were even more difficult to deal with, or even impossible to deal with, and they could only deal with it passively. It was as if they had to do whatever the Dharma Supreme asked them to do. The more outstanding a person was, the more difficult it was to guard against them once they did evil. They even had to help them in their actions even if they didn't want to. Because even if they stopped him, they would also be helping him. This was what gave them a huge headache. The discussion between the three of them could also be considered as a short break. Then they went their separate ways. This time Chu Lu also had to act on her own. After all, the area was too big. If they could move in one more direction, they would have more strength. On the other hand, people from the big clans had also started to move around to dispose of the corpses. However, most of the experts were gathering at the same place. Flames of war were rising everywhere in the world. Gu Duxing and the rest split into two directions and charged out. On one hand, they were disposing of the corpses to prevent the appearance of a plague, and on the other hand, they were searching for traces of the higher-ups of the law enforcement officers. However, the situation they encountered was exactly the same as Chu Yang and the rest. As long as the kidnappers appeared, the law enforcement officers would immediately leave. Even if it meant giving them a few lives, they would immediately leave without a trace. As for those law enforcement officers who were caught, when they saw that there was no hope of escaping, they all committed suicide at once. They didn't even give you a chance to ask questions. It was just that straightforward. This kind of thing made Gu Duxing and the others feel aggrieved, depressed, sad and regretful. The martial world was already extremely chaotic at this moment. North of the capital, beside the official road. It was right beside the dense forest where Chu Yang and Yi Zue had fought previously. Yu Lingxue, who was dressed in clothes whiter than snow, no longer had his usual handsome and suave look. With a face full of rage, he suppressed dozens of law enforcement officers. Speak. Where is the Dharma Supreme? In front of him, just his surging aura alone was enough to make these law enforcement experts not dare to move at all. Yu Lingxue had not truly been so furious for 10,000 years. The power of his fury at this moment was simply earth-shattering. The leader of the law enforcement officers laughed bitterly. Master Yu, you really shouldn't be asking me about this. It's not like you don't know what kind of organization we law enforcement officers are. It's also not like you don't know what kind of person the Dharma Supreme is. It's also futile for you to ask me. Why waste that energy? Just give me a quick death. It won't waste your time and won't delay my journey. Smack. Yu Lingxue slapped him on the face and said furiously, why would that bastard make such a crazy decision? What? Tell me. That person laughed and said, Master Yu, the Dharma Supreme's orders are law in this world. No one can disobey. Whoever dares to disobey, we brothers will chop him up. Whatever the Dharma Supreme says, we will do. Not to mention killing a few people, even if it's to destroy this world. As long as the Dharma Supreme says it, there must be a reason. We will do it, there's no need for so many whys. Do we still need to repeatedly explain such a simple principle? Yu Lingxue was so angry that he was trembling all over. He shouted hoarsely, nonsense, it's fine if you bastards kill people from big clans, but why do you even want to kill those innocent martial artists? It's fine if you kill them, but why do you have to leave corpses all over the place and not even bother to clean up? Do you know what will become of this continent if this goes on? He roared angrily, law enforcement officers have protected the world for 100,000 years. Do you intend to completely destroy it in these few days? What are your intentions? What are the Dharma Supreme's intentions? Don't you feel guilty for doing such a deranged and inhumane thing? A hint of guilt flashed across that law enforcement officer's eyes for the first time. He said in a low voice, since the Dharma Supreme has arranged it, we will do so. As for the reason, there's no need to know. Master Yu's sincere and chivalrous advice is admirable. However, no matter how powerful you and Master Feng are, it's just the two of you. It's impossible for you to change the world situation. He laughed loudly. Since Master Yu has appeared, I no longer have any hopes of escaping. I might as well die here to appease the world. After saying that, he slapped his own head into smithereens. Blood flowed out of his 7 orifices on his distorted face, and he revealed a strange smile. Master Yu, is there really right and wrong in this world? Ah. Before he finished his last sentence, he was already dead. Chapter 1664. Shocked, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro tried their best to stop them. However, even with the Moon Breeze couple's strength, they were only able to stop 4 people. Even these 4 people, after failing to commit suicide, actually chose to sever their own heart meridians and finally set foot on the road to the netherworld. So resolute. Looking at the scattered corpses in front of them, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro felt cold all over. The two of them had just reached the periphery of the capital when this catastrophe had already erupted. At first, they didn't expect things to be so serious. Later on, when the commotion became bigger and bigger, the two of them flew out to investigate, only to find out that the whole world had changed in a single night. The two of them didn't even have time to enter the capital and immediately started to obstruct from all sides. However, even if the two of them had heaven-defying means and peerless cultivation, they still couldn't stop this large-scale chaos that had erupted in all directions. Looking at the fresh blood flowing under their feet and many lives ending in an instant, Yu Lingxue roared madly at the sky, Dharma Supreme, you bastard, what are you trying to do? Come out. Come out and fight with me. Dharma Supreme, even if you have your reasons. Even if you have grievances. Even if you have hatred. But, what crimes did this world commit? What crimes did the common people commit? Why do you have to be so deranged? You bastard, come out now. Yu Lingxue's inexplicably sorrowful and indignant voice spread far and wide. His angry roar shook the area within 1,000 miles. The clouds in the sky seemed to have also been shaken by this sorrowful roar and actually started to rain. After a long time, Feng Yuro comforted him softly, let's go into the capital first. The catastrophe is already a foregone conclusion. With just the two of us, it's completely useless. We have to gather together to discuss a solution. Yu Lingxue sighed helplessly at the sky. The cold rain fell on his mouth, but he felt bitterness and helplessness from the bottom of his heart. The two of them buried the corpses of the law enforcement officers in the rain. With a long roar, they ran towards the capital. After the two of them left, a long sigh came from one side of the forest. Inside, under a big tree, the Dharma Supreme stood quietly in his black robe. The rain poured down and landed on him. He just stood there motionless. He didn't even circulate his energy to ward off the rain, causing his whole body to be soaked. He was in a sorry state. In this dark place, he slowly lifted his feet and walked out step by step. The Dharma Supreme had a complicated expression on his face as he looked at the new tombstones on the ground. He stood there quietly, not saying a word. The rain fell on his body crazily, but he remained motionless. Right at this moment, A magnificent sword light suddenly appeared in the distance. Gu Duxing asked coldly, "Who's in front?" Before he could finish his words, he had already arrived before Zhang Xian. "So it's you? I finally found you." Gu Duxing's black dragon sword lit up and he said sternly, "Dharma Supreme, revoke your ridiculous order." The Dharma Supreme's black robes fluttered in the wind. He looked at Gu Duxing with an extremely complicated expression before he retreated. It was just a glance. There was helplessness, envy and cold calmness. Gu Duxing roared and the black dragon sword flashed fiercely. At this moment, the dazzling brightness of the sword light actually completely overshadowed the lightning in the sky, rushing towards the Dharma Supreme. The raindrops were stimulated by his aura and turned into sharp blades that could cut a human body. They all attacked together. In the midst of the sword light, the Dharma Supreme's face flashed indifferently. Gu Duxing clearly saw that the Dharma Supreme looked at him with a smile and approval. Then, as if the ground had shrunk, the Dharma Supreme quickly distanced himself from Gu Duxing's sword. The sword light was still flashing, but the Dharma Supreme retreated with his hands behind his back. In an instant he was already 1,000 feet away. Gu Duxing came over on his sword with a thunderous momentum. "Dharma Supreme, don't go. Don't go." But the Dharma Supreme had already mysteriously disappeared in the rain, completely disappearing without a trace. Gu Duxing's sword moved horizontally, like a bolt of lightning, giving chase. As a sword grade supreme, the speed of man and sword as one was definitely at the highest level in the world. But even with such astonishing speed, the Dharma Supreme's black figure could still be seen from afar at the very beginning, but after a while, it completely disappeared. Gu Duxing chased for a distance of 1,000 miles, but there was no trace of him at all. The surroundings were as silent as a ghost town. Gu Duxing stood in the rain feeling a little lonely. The Dharma Supreme's current cultivation was actually much, much higher than his. This time the Dharma Supreme did not attack him. He did not even have the intention to attack him. Then, what Mo Chinji said about the Dharma Supreme's mentality was basically something that was set in stone. Thinking about the look the Dharma Supreme gave him when he faced his sword light, that indescribable sense of envy, praise, and that complicated and pained expression, Gu Duxing did not know what to feel at this moment. He actually felt a little bitter and a little sad. He could not help but roar to the sky, "I know what you mean. I understand how you feel. But what you are doing now, are you trying to destroy the everlasting reputation that you and your brothers have built? I know you want compensation, we all know you are upset, but even if you kill everyone in the world, will you be able to go back?" Gu Duxing shouted, "Dharma Supreme, I know you can hear me. Let me ask you, even if you kill everyone in the world, will you be able to go back? Answer me, why don't you answer me? You cannot answer me, but can you not answer your own heart? Your heart must also desperately want to know the answer." In a dense forest about 10 miles away from where Gu Duxing was, the Dharma Supreme, dressed in black, sat quietly under a big tree, as if he had melted into this boundless rain. His face was filled with endless melancholy and an indescribable bitter smile. "Can't go back, can't go back, can't go back. Her." The silent bitter smile, the corners of his eyes were a little bright. He raised his head and the pouring rain hit his face just like that. "The world is vast and I am the only one left here." The Dharma Supreme felt the slight pain of the rain hitting his face. For a moment, sorrow came from his heart. "All of you are not here anymore. Only I am here. I will never be able to compare to Wu Jueqing. He still has a chance to meet his brothers, but I can never go back, nor can I catch up to him. I don't have the face to see all of you anymore. My heart? Do I still have a heart?" Her. The Dharma Supreme's body rose abruptly. With a sudden turn in the rain, he disappeared without a trace with a swoosh. Gu Duxing shouted twice and waited quietly just like that. But after a long time, the Dharma Supreme still did not appear. The sound of something breaking through the air kept coming. "Duxing, have you found the Dharma Supreme?" It was Xie Danqiong who rushed over. "Where is the Dharma Supreme? Is he not here?" Dong Wuxiang also rushed over. After a while, even Mo Tianji rushed over. "Brother Jie was actually here." "No, I lost him." Gu Duxing sighed. The Dharma Supreme's current cultivation is really too terrifying. It has already exceeded the scope of my knowledge. There is no way to catch up at all. What did the Dharma Supreme say? From start to end, the Dharma Supreme only looked at me once and left. Gu Duxing's voice was filled with melancholy. I could clearly feel that there was envy in that glance. Sigh. The brothers sighed from the bottom of their hearts. If the Dharma Supreme had been doing evil all the time, it would have been fine. However, there was a great reason for his actions now. And he had the same experience as everyone else. This made everyone sigh involuntarily. Thinking of the Dharma Supreme's tens of thousands of years of painstaking planning to avenge his brothers, exhausting the world and his entire life, only to realize at the last moment that he had actually made a huge mistake. Then he hysterically and crazily took revenge on this world that he had originally protected. Everyone felt anger and hatred in their hearts, but also a little heartache for him, if the Dharma Supreme was as detestable and hateful as he was. If he was as deserving of pity and sympathy. A pitiful person would definitely have some hateful aspects. But a hateful person. But he might not necessarily be deserving of sympathy and pity. Such a person could be said to be a combination of contradictions that had never been seen before. It was believed that from ancient times till now, and even after millions of years, there might not be another one like him. The chaos continued. Not only did it not show any signs of subsiding, it instead became more and more intense. Because the Dharma Supreme had given another order, an even crazier order. Even if it meant sacrificing human lives, they had to completely attack the foundations of all the super clans within 3 days. Otherwise, all the participants would collectively commit suicide. Within 3 days, all blood payers who participated in the attack would receive double the rewards. Once this order was given, the law enforcement officers immediately went crazy. Within a night's time, the stalemate between both sides was completely broken. This night was even crazier than the previous night. Countless law enforcers rushed forward one after another. They had gone crazy. The original confrontation was no longer effective. Even if there were only 3 to 5 law enforcement officers, they actually dared to charge towards hundreds of experts. Even if they knew that they were going to die, they still had to charge. Some law enforcement officers who attacked the headquarters of the super clans directly used their own bodies as weapons and charged upwards. Once they charged up, they would disintegrate into pieces. Even if their lives could only break a stone or a brick on the walls of the headquarters of the super clans, they would not hesitate to do so. Under such a tragic attack, the super clans were in a mess. The super clans had been living like kings for tens of thousands of years. Although the law enforcement officers had more power than the super clans, they had been constantly on the move in the martial world all these years. Compared to the law enforcement officers, not to mention their martial strength, even their mentality and that kind of ruthlessness were far superior. Moreover, with the Dharma Supreme's pressure, the law enforcement officers frantically came from all directions to help, and blood payers rushed over. In the latter half of the night, the situation was already one-sided. In the wee hours of the morning, news came from the Chen clan. The headquarters of the Chen clan had been completely destroyed. Only a middle-grade supreme martial artist and a few upper-grade supreme martial artists escaped. The rest were all slaughtered. More than 300,000 people in the headquarters of the Chen clan were all burned to the ground. It was said that the smell of burnt flesh permeated thousands of miles of land. When this news reached the capital, Chen Yingfeng, the founder of the Chen clan, blacked out and vomited a mouthful of blood before collapsing. Speaking of which, there is an event at the end of the month and Feng Ling may have to go out. The time is not fixed yet. I will work hard to save up my manuscripts and strive to keep updating during the event. G. Chapter 1665. The faces of Yi Qinshan and the others were as dark as still water. They couldn't contain their anger. The law enforcement officers were really so ruthless? They didn't leave any leeway at all. When the sun had just risen, news came from their home. Their home had also fallen. Then it was news of the Zhuge clan's fall. The Ling clan was also in an abnormal state of battle. They were in imminent danger and could collapse at any time. Dark clouds covered the entire sky of the continent, and murderous intent filled the air. The affairs of the world were unpredictable. In the entire continent there was only the capital. Just a few days ago it was still the most dangerous capital. But now it had actually become the safest capital. In fact, this was not surprising. This gathering was where the most outstanding martial artists of the upper 3 heavens were gathered except for the big clans. Especially after a day and night of fighting with the involvement of super experts such as Tribulation and Wu Jueqing and Moon Breeze, the martial artists who were gathered to participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting also took action one after another, gradually forming a tyrannical tide of resistance. The law enforcement officers' forces were defeated. In the late afternoon, after a sudden downpour, the law enforcers from the Du side vanished without a trace in an extremely short period of time. They weren't completely wiped out. Instead, they retreated collectively. Although the law enforcement officers had retreated from the capital, it was still impossible for the people in the capital to leave if they wanted to. After the law enforcement officers left the capital, they immediately went into hiding and lay in ambush in extremely secretive places. However, they still kept a close watch on the movements in the capital. They only allowed people to enter the capital, but they definitely didn't allow those who entered the capital to leave. For a moment, the capital had inexplicably become a forbidden area. No one was allowed to leave no matter which direction it was. In this period of time, because of the Tianding Grand Meeting, only a large number of people would enter and very few people would leave. After such a lockdown, it seemed even more strict and crowded. Because at every moment, a large number of people who didn't know what was going on would enter. Or perhaps it could be described like this. At this moment, the capital. It had become a huge prison. There were people who could enter but not people who could leave. The ancestor of the Chen family, Chen Yingfeng, broke out of the encirclement in the middle of the night. He wanted to go back to his family to take a look. However, at the border of the capital, he was intercepted by the high-level powerhouses of the law enforcement officers. After the ancestor of the Chen clan, who was already at the peak stage, killed dozens of law enforcers, he was finally besieged by several high-level supreme beings of the law enforcers. In the end, he returned with serious injuries. It was only then that everyone knew about the blockade formed by the enforcers. Against this blockade, Mo Chenji came up with a plan. He arranged the army formation and made Zhuge Zhangqiong and the others act as if they were returning to reinforce the Zhuge clan. Then Wu Jueqing, Moon Breeze, and the others would secretly follow them along the way. Along the way, Diwu Qingru was prepared to act according to the situation, with the intention of luring the snake out of its hole. With the accompaniment of these three experts, even if the Dharma Supreme were to come in person, he would definitely not be able to get away with it. Everyone's most ideal plan was, of course, to be able to restrain the Dharma Supreme and settle the matter once and for all. However, this time the enforcers did not do anything at all. There was no way to stop him. They were allowed to come and go as they wished. In the end, everyone had no choice but to retreat. Everyone could not help but follow Zhuge Zhangqiong to the Zhuge clan. Zhuge Zhangqiong wanted to go back to the Zhuge clan to take a look. However, the moment he left the group, he was immediately ambushed. Luckily, he escaped back with all his might. It was only because everyone came to his rescue that he was spared. After a few rounds of probing, the results were more or less the same. The enforcers were extremely astute. In the few operations, not to mention waiting for the Dharma Supreme to appear, they did not even encounter a single one of the enforcers who were first-grade supreme martial artists and above. However, as long as it was a team of super experts accompanying them, the result would definitely be heavy losses or even total annihilation. Faced with such a situation, everyone was completely helpless. Xiao Chenyu, Chen Yingfeng, Zhuge Zhangqiong, Ling Muyang and Qiu, these few ancestors of the great clans, were even more furious at this result. It was just that their chests were about to explode, but there was nothing they could do. They could only sigh helplessly. In the battles outside the capital, the enforcers who were exceptionally strong individually had the complete upper hand. With the powerful strength of the enforcers and the blood payers in the world, this force was simply unstoppable. Furthermore, they attacked without any regard for their lives. In just a few days they had secured victory. Then they secured victory. Now the Chen clan, Shao clan and Zhuge clan were all destroyed. Although the Ling clan was still alive, they were also in a mess and in danger of being annihilated at any time. Now, the only clan that could still be considered intact among the great clans was the Yi clan. However, everyone knew that this was only temporary stability for the Yi clan. After the enforcers had completely wiped out the other clans, that crazy spearhead would be directed at the capital. Once all their forces were gathered, the Yi clan's annihilation would be imminent. Even though everyone knew what was going on, they could not do anything about it. On the fifth day, the remnants of the Zhuge clan, who were closest to the capital, desperately broke through the siege and entered the capital. When Zhuge Zhangqiong saw this, he immediately trembled all over and tears flowed down his face. He couldn't help but cry. The situation of this remnant force was really too tragic. The Zhuge clan had tens of thousands of years of foundation and tens of thousands of experts, but in the end only a mere 73 people broke through the siege and arrived at the capital. Moreover, almost every one of them was riddled with injuries and looked haggard. Many of them were like skeletons. There were also 2 people who, after finally arriving at the capital, suddenly relaxed due to their serious injuries and actually fell into a deep sleep. A dream? What about the rest? Zhuge Zhangqiong trembled and asked with a sliver of hope. More than 70 people knelt down and cried at the same time. Elder Master. The Zhuge clan is finished. Zhuge Zangqiong's face suddenly turned pale. With trembling lips he asked, could it be, the entire clan, men and women, old and young, are all wiped out? After the Zhuge clan's second-grade supreme martial artist said this, Zhuge Zangqiong's throat made a gurgling sound, as if he wanted to curse and howl, but in the end he didn't say anything. His throat gurgled a few times and his face suddenly flushed red. Then he fell backward stiffly. That very afternoon, the remnants of the Qin clan finally arrived at the capital. When Qin Yingfeng saw them, his body, which was already seriously injured, couldn't take it anymore. Without even asking, he fainted. Or rather, it was a little inappropriate to say that the Qin clan's remnants were the remnants, because only a total of 3 people escaped from the Qin clan's headquarters. 1 second-grade supreme martial artist and 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists. As for the rest, hundreds of thousands of people, just like the Zhuge clan, no one survived. The Qin clan. The mountains within a radius of thousands of miles have completely sunk into a sea of fire. It's too tragic. It's really too tragic. The smell of barbecued human flesh can be smelled within a radius of thousands of miles. This is a blood feud, a blood feud. That second-grade supreme martial artist from the Qin clan had tears all over his face. He was on the verge of breaking down, barely able to support himself as he said these words. As for the other 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists, they were seriously injured and had traveled a long distance. Once they arrived, they fainted. However, at least they didn't die immediately. They only fell into a deep coma due to exhaustion of energy. Everyone's faces were as heavy as water. The sky was dark and gloomy. Chu Yang's face was equally gloomy. The Qin clan was the clan that Zi had sworn to exterminate that day. For the sake of Wei Wuyan's blood feud, the Qin clan's ending seemed to have been decided long ago. However, before Zi could go there, it was completely destroyed by the Dharma Supreme's hands. Or rather, it was destroyed by the Dharma Supreme's one order. Moreover, it was the most tragic clan among all the clans. Out of hundreds of thousands of people, only 3 managed to escape in the end. Only 3 people. Chu Yang didn't even want to say, shit me? Sympathy? Pity? Or regret that he didn't personally take revenge? All his thoughts turned into a long sigh. If Chu Yang had gone there personally to take revenge, he believed that the Qin clan wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. Chu Yang might kill all the martial artists in his rage, but to the elderly, the weak, the women, the children and the defenseless, Chu Yang wouldn't touch them. This had nothing to do with soft-heartedness. It was just a person's bottom line. However, the Dharma Supreme was so thorough. He didn't even leave a single strand of human hair behind. He cut the weeds and uprooted the roots, not sparing even the fowls and dogs. On the 3rd day after the people from the Qin clan arrived, the remaining people from the Shao clan from the southeast also finally arrived. They were slightly better off than the Zhuge clan and the Qin clan with about 100 people. In an instant they all became a sea of hatred. Strong curses and vicious curses filled the entire capital city. Then the remaining people from the Shao clan also arrived. The Shao clan's situation was slightly better. In the end, more than 500 people broke through the encirclement and entered. Such a number of people made the eyes of Qin Yingfeng, Zhuge Zangqiong and the others red with envy. Based on the fact that our clan was almost completely wiped out, how could your clan have so many people left? This kind of unreasonable jealousy made Qiu fly into a rage. If not for everyone's persuasion, a super internal strife would have started. However, when news of the Ling clan arrived, Ling Muyang replaced Qiu and became the target of public criticism. The battle was over. Although the headquarters of the Ling clan was inevitably destroyed and the casualties were extremely heavy, almost all of the elderly, women and children in the clan were injured. And after pleading with the Ling clan, all of them moved to the original location of the Li clan and settled down. Currently, many of the remaining elites of the Ling clan rushed over to the capital city through the night. This news made the eyes of Shao Qinyu and the others red with envy. They looked at Ling Muyang as if they were looking at a traitor. Based on the fact that you killed all of our clan members but not your clan members? Your family's women and children are women and children, but are my family's women and children all supreme martial artists? What exactly is the difference between you, Ling Muyang, and the Dharma Supreme? Ling Muyang was almost driven mad by such unreasonable remarks. Moreover, there was no way he could defend himself. After a huge argument, he simply led his clansmen to the inn where the Tribulation Sword Master Chu Yang and the others were staying. He was so furious that his hair stood on end. Chapter 1666. Brothers who have been together for more than 10,000 years, how can you say something as ridiculous as colluding with the Dharma Supreme to harm your brother's clan? Was my family not destroyed? Was no one in my family dead? If not for the fact that he was still concerned about the big picture, Ling Muyang would have drawn his sword and cut off all ties with them on the spot. Sword Master Chu, tell me, what kind of ridiculous logic is this? Ling Muyang was still so angry that his chest was heaving up and down and his eyes were wide open even after 3 rounds of drinking. Chu Yang and the others could only smile bitterly in response. When a person has suffered a huge blow, their mentality would definitely be different from usual. Moreover, the more it was like this, the more the despicable side of human nature would be exposed. And at this moment, Xiao Qinyu, Zhuge Zhangqiong, Chen Yingfeng and the others were undoubtedly having such a mentality. My family is all dead, why isn't your family dead? This was a special mentality that was extremely unreasonable. However, at a time like this mentality was the most common. Especially after their family was destroyed, when they saw the happiness of other people's families, they couldn't wait to destroy them. There were even people who put this narrow-minded and unreasonable mentality into action, resulting in many tragedies in the human world. In other words, this was antisocial, anti-ethical and anti-human behavior. Chen Yingfeng and the others were also 10,000-year-old monsters. Their mentality was naturally much stronger than ordinary people. However, at this moment, when faced with the sudden destruction of their clans and the destruction of their countless efforts over 10,000 years, this kind of extreme mentality was no different from ordinary people. In fact, it was even more serious, even more extreme. However, why did the law enforcement officers only let my Ling clan off? This is something that even I can't understand. After Ling Muyang scolded them, he actually still felt a little lucky and thankful. Of course, he was even more puzzled. I don't seem to have any relationship with the Dharma Supreme, Ling Muyang muttered to himself. Chu Yang, Mo Tianji and the others smiled bitterly at each other. At first glance, it seemed very strange that the Dharma Supreme let the Ling clan off. However, they all understood that although the Dharma Supreme seemed deranged now, he still had very strict rules and principles. The reason why the Ling clan didn't suffer large-scale casualties was because the Ling clan didn't have many evil deeds in these 10,000 years. Besides, it was also because Ling Muyang had lived his life in the martial world with a clear conscience. This undoubtedly played a very important role as well. Also, the Ling family was located in the extreme north, and Ling Muyang's upbringing was very strict. Even if there were some foppish sons in the clan, their evil deeds would not be exposed. Over the past 10,000 years, the accumulated evil deeds were few and far between. This caused the Ling family to be in such a calamity that almost engulfed the entire heavenly layer. In the end, he barely managed to escape. Although they had also paid the price of tens of thousands of warriors, they were much luckier than the other major clans. However, there was no need to say this out loud. No matter what the Dharma Supreme did, no matter what his standpoint was, no matter what his original intention was, but now that things had come to this, no one would let him off. The Dharma Supreme, no matter how great his difficulties were, the loss of tens of millions of lives, and the lives of the elites of the heavenly layer at that, had to be borne by the Dharma Supreme. Purge the world with blood. These 4 words. Usually he would only say it when he was angry. In fact, he had said it before. It was rare for someone to try it out, but now the Dharma Supreme had actually done it. And he was still doing it, continuing to do it. The so-called Tianding Grand Meeting now existed only in name. Everyone was rubbing their palms and sharpening their swords, waiting for the law enforcement officers to come in large numbers so that they could fight to the death in the capital. Such a peerless villain, he must not be allowed to live in this world anymore. There would be endless trouble. Now, the so-called reinforcement from all sides had long been a complete joke. It was completely meaningless. They might as well wait here and fight to the death with the enemy. In fact, this was originally the idea that Chu Yang and Mo Tianji had suggested back then, but it was rejected by Yi Qinshan and the rest. However, the current situation forced everyone to this step. Thinking of what Chu Yang said more than 10 days ago and Diwu Qingrou's more than one suggestion, Yi Qinshan and the rest were all filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, why did they do it back then? If they had acted earlier, at least they could have saved some of the clan's elites. It was still the same saying. You could find any kind of medicine in this world, but the medicine of regret was really nowhere to be found. The enemy dares to die, but we don't dare to fight with our lives. We've already lost our voice. Instead of having many ways to block us, we might as well gather our forces in one place. We can reduce the number of targets we can attack, gather all our strength and fight point to point. This way we might still have a chance of survival. If our forces are scattered and the super clans do their own thing, we can expect to be wiped out. If we want to save all of them, the result is that we can't save all of them. In this chaotic world we have to give up something. Where there's life, there's hope. These were the words that Chu Yang asked Diwu Qingru to bring back that day. At that time, although the law enforcement officers had already started to target them, the ancestors still stubbornly believed that a wise man like the Dharma Supreme wouldn't be so unwise and completely disregard the loss of his own forces. Or was he venting something? Or was he doing something important? Or even just to cater to the extraterrestrial demons and collect a large amount of soul power of the dead? It was definitely impossible for him to really wipe out all the super clans. After all, the price to pay for that was too high. The losses outweighed the gains. Just the 4 words, the losses outweighed the gains, were already a military strategy that couldn't be used. Perhaps after a few days of madness, the Dharma Supreme would stop after achieving his goal. Therefore, although everyone was anxious and pained by the loss of their own side, they did not despair in their bones. After all, in the past 10,000 years, if the Dharma Supreme really wanted to wipe out the super clans, he had plenty of better opportunities. Just based on the current situation, there might be better options. Just like now, where the enemy lost 800 men and the self lost 1,000 men, how could there be any benefits to speak of? Since he didn't do it when the benefits were greater, what more now? Not to mention that the Dharma Supreme's greatest enemy was ultimately the Tribulation Sword Master. Even if the super clans were eyesores, they were ultimately secondary enemies. Moreover, they had cooperated with each other for thousands of years. Allying with secondary enemies and attacking the main enemy was a battle strategy that had never changed since ancient times. This was also the biggest reason why the super clans were willing to put aside their old grudges and join forces with Chu Yang. Because the Dharma Supreme was their current main enemy. Therefore, the ancestors didn't take Chu Yang's warning too seriously. Even Chen Yingfeng once sneered and said, "Tribulation Sword Master's words are probably a blatant lie. If we really gather all our elite experts here, how would we be able to resist? It's equivalent to giving away our own land for free. What's the benefit?" Perhaps there are benefits too. This move would be convenient for the Tribulation Sword Master, as he can borrow a knife to wipe out the super clans without any effort. What a good plan. Even in the face of a great enemy, he can still come up with such a brilliant plan to reduce the strength of his allies. Admirable, admirable. As soon as he said this, a few ancestors immediately sneered. Although they didn't say it out loud, they were actually expressing their agreement in their hearts. Even someone as composed as Diwu Qingru could only be speechless when faced with such a situation. If someone was so narrow-minded to this extent, and there were many people who were the same, then no matter what kind of misfortune this group of people would encounter in the end, they would really only have themselves to blame. Diwu Qingru's words were definitely not referring to Chu Yang. Now, after the super clans were wiped out, everyone was bitterly regretting their past actions. Why did you all come earlier? At most, Chu Yang had the heavy pill. There was no medicine for regret. Even if there was medicine for regret, it probably wouldn't be given to this bunch of people. At this point, even though Diwu Qingru was disheartened, he could only choose to collect his emotions. He excused himself and returned to the Diwu clan to gather the defeated soldiers. In the future, he could only wait quietly for the moment when the final battle with the Dharma Supreme and the law enforcement officers came. At this time, there was really no need for any strategy. Besides, now that everyone had gone crazy, who could still calmly analyze what was going on? What was there to plan? Even if they still used him as a military advisor, what was the point of his orders being obeyed in public but disobeyed in private? It was definitely impossible to be united again. Because the people's hearts had already collapsed. People who were even jealous that their 10,000-year-old brother's clan was not wiped out. What else could he say? What else could he say? What else could he say? Strength. Now only strength is left. Just as Diwu Qingru walked out of the Yi clan, Chu Yang was in the inn, thinking about the comparison of strength between both parties. From the news brought back by Gu Duxing, Chu Yang could feel a sincere sense of oppression. As a sword-grade supreme martial artist, Gu Duxing's strength was definitely at the peak of the strongest in the heavenly layer. However, according to him, the Dharma Supreme's current strength was far above his. Also, when he fought with the Dharma Supreme previously, he was also far from being a match for the Dharma Supreme, which confirmed Gu Duxing's words. If he continued to deduce based on this, the final battle of the Tianding Grand Meeting that the Dharma Supreme had mentioned earlier would be somewhat dangerous for him and the others. The Dharma Supreme owed and the Dharma Supreme felt guilty. The target was his big brother, his brothers, and it seemed to have nothing to do with him. Perhaps there would be a little bit of affection, but as the Dharma Supreme had said, when the time came, he would definitely not show mercy. Moreover, Chu Yang disdained the victory that was given to him by the enemy, and so did his brothers. Since things had already come to this, facing his brothers would be an unprecedentedly fierce battle. Therefore, the most urgent thing now was to improve their strength as much as possible. Their current strength was far from enough, and there were only a few days left. Time was too short. However, if they blindly relied on heavy elixirs to improve their strength, even if they could improve further, they would not be able to reach the level that the Dharma Supreme was at now. According to Gu Duxing's description, Chu Yang could imagine that after the Dharma Supreme killed the extraterrestrial demon, he must have absorbed the extraterrestrial demon's divine spirit, and his strength improved greatly again. Chapter 1667. Another crucial point was that the Dharma Supreme was so familiar with his killer move, the Tribulation Sword technique. It could be said that he knew himself and his enemy. However, he only knew himself and did not know his enemy. He could only rely on brute force. The only advantage he had was the Tribulation Sword. However, this advantage was obviously not very useful to the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme, who was also familiar with the sharpness of the Tribulation Sword, would definitely not be so stupid as to go head-on against Chu Yang's divine sword. Chu Yang frowned and walked out of the room. He came to a room and knocked on the door. The door opened. Yu Lingxue appeared in front of the door. "Sword Master Chu? You're here." Chu Yang smiled and flashed into the room. Feng Yuro was in the room, looking out the window with a worried expression. When she saw Chu Yang enter, she quickly got up to welcome him. Chu Yang did not waste any more words. He simply took out 2 big jade bottles and placed them on the table. "Elder Yu, this is the spring of life. And it's a fully matured spring of life." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Speaking of which, this matter has been on my mind for a very long time. Finally, when I obtained the 8th fragment of the Tribulation Sword, I managed to catalyze the spring of life by chance. This can be considered as settling one of my worries." Spring of life. It's really the spring of life. Feng Yuro turned around abruptly. Looking at the 2 jade bottles on the table, she actually felt that it was unreal. The 2 of them had been cultivating the Moon Breeze dual cultivation technique for a long time. All this time they had been unable to break through the bottleneck. As a result, all the blood in their bodies had been converted into cultivation. As a result, they had lost the opportunity to have children. The couple had been brooding over this matter for 10,000 years. And the only hope to break through this obstacle was the legendary Spring of Life. However, legend had it that the Spring of Life was a sacred item of the fairy race. The fairy race had long disappeared in the long river of history. The 2 of them had long given up hope. Until they discovered by chance that Chu Yang actually had the spiritual spring. Only then did they have some hope. But it was only hope. Although the spiritual spring and the Spring of Life only had a difference of 1 word, their effects were worlds apart. Even after tens of thousands of years, it might not evolve into the Spring of Life. But he really didn't expect that Chu Yang would bring over the Spring of Life after only a year. Is it really the Spring of Life? Yu Lingxue also became excited. He rushed over and almost collided with his wife. When the bottle was opened, a dazzling glow similar to that of moonlight emerged. A refreshing and elegant fragrance slowly diffused into the air. The moment they smelled this fragrance, they instantly felt their bodies relax. It was as if every single cell in their bodies was cheering and increasing their vitality. It really is the Spring of Life. Feng Yuro was so excited that her voice was trembling, and her pretty face was flushed red. He raised his head and looked at Chu Yang gratefully. "Chu Yang, thank you very much. The Yu clan is finally going to have an heir." Chu Yang coughed a few times and felt that his face was a little red, but it was because of embarrassment. Although a certain king of hell's skin was thick, he still blushed at this moment. "It seems like this Yu family's offspring is a matter between you two. You two can discuss it yourselves. I really couldn't handle it if he said it to me so directly. This thing had nothing to do with me, right? If it did have anything to do with me, then it would be better if it didn't. What kind of person have I become? I only provided a bit of spring water, nothing else." "Yes, yes." Yu Lingxue also held Chu Yang's hand excitedly and shook it forcefully. He was actually a little incoherent and his handsome face was also flushed red. "The Yu clan finally has an heir. Chu Yang, thank you very much for your help this time. Your great help. Our Yu clan's ancestors will also thank you." Chu Yang was speechless. What's wrong with these two people? They were usually quite serious, but why were they speaking so incoherently now? What are you talking about over there? Feng Yuro finally realized her husband's faulty wording. She pinched Yu Lingshua's waist fiercely, her face flushed red and she was extremely embarrassed. You fool, you're still so foolish after more than 10,000 years. Yu Lingshua laughed foolishly, and then his face twisted in pain. He hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. Yes, it wasn't Chu Yang who helped. Chu Yang didn't help at all. It was me. It was myself. Obviously, this person was so happy that he became silly. Just now he was just speaking incoherently, but now he was just babbling nonsense. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. On the other side, Feng Yuro couldn't help but feel ashamed. Then she suddenly exploded. With a bang she knocked her husband down to the ground. Then with a whoosh she entered the inner room. Chu Yang continued to be dumbfounded. Feng Yuro came out with a red face and an extremely embarrassed look on her face. She carried the 2 bottles of Spring of Life into the room and closed the door with a bang. She didn't come out again. It was still very obvious that this woman was driven mad by Yu Lingxue, this fool. The more she spoke, the more outrageous, the more incoherently, the more embarrassing, the more, Io. Yu Lingxue held his thigh, his face twitching a little. There was also some uncontrollable excitement. He said to Chu Yang, "This time it's really all thanks to you. If it wasn't for you, our Yu clan wouldn't have the incense lamps." Chu Yang was dumbfounded, and his mouth was agape and his tongue was tied. Suddenly he felt that whatever he said was inappropriate. What kind of person was this? What kind of words were these? Why did they sound so ambiguous? It was already very ambiguous before, but now it seemed to be even more. In the end, he had no choice but to say very pathetically, "That's what I should do." "It's nothing." "Since that's the case then, are you guys busy? I'll go out first. I won't disturb you guys." After saying that, he felt that there was something wrong with his words. He was about to step back with his head full of sweat. Yu Lingxue still didn't realize what was going on. He said excitedly, Okay, we'll be busy for a while. I'll go and busy for a while, no. Why don't you sit for a while more? Chu Yang stepped back with his face full of sweat. If he continued to sit, would he want to die? Even if he didn't want his own life, he had to take someone's life. It was more important to leave quickly. Just as he stepped out, he heard a soft moan from inside. Then the door closed with a bang, almost squeezing Chu Yang's straight nose inside. A certain king of hell stepped back quickly, but he still felt the wind from the door blowing against his face. Even his hair fluttered backward. He thought to himself that it was a close call. Then he heard the sound of punching and kicking inside as well as embarrassed and angry scolding. "You idiot. How am I going to face people in the future? Oh. What's wrong with me? I'm just happy. You're really going to piss me off, but you can't. Hurry up and block the sound. Yes. I'm so pissed off I forgot everything." Then Chu Yang couldn't hear anything else. 2 extraordinarily powerful supreme martial artists' divine senses completely sealed the room. Even the current Dharma Supreme might not be able to pry into the space sealed by the 2 of them, let alone a certain king of hell. A certain king of hell was at most a little thick-skinned, but he didn't have the hobby of eavesdropping on the private matters of a married couple. Chu Yang rubbed his head and walked out with lingering fear. There were already a few heads poking out from several rooms. What's going on? Why did such powerful supreme martial artists' divine senses suddenly appear? Could it be those 2 experts sparring? What's going on? Boss, why are you here? What happened? Yeah, what's wrong? Chu Yang hurriedly explained with a head full of sweat. Well, the Moon Breeze couple is very busy, please don't disturb them. With that he left. Halfway through he couldn't help but pat himself. You just said not to disturb them, why did you say they were very busy? Busy? Busy with what? GMO scratched his head, a look of suspicion on his face. It's not the time to be busy yet. So? Luo Kadi looked puzzled. The battle hasn't started yet, what can they be busy with? That's right? Xia Danxiong pondered. I can't think of what they can be busy with either. Could it be some new way of fighting, looking at the divine senses entanglement just now, or maybe they're sparring? Maybe they're studying how to fight in depth. Listening to the various guesses behind, there were actually some that were very close to the correct answer, as if they were really sparring. Minister Chu went upstairs with a whoosh. What everyone said was very normal, but why did Chu Yang feel that he was evil? Why did it feel like there was another meaning? After returning to his room, Chu Yang immediately entered the tribulation space. The matter of Yu Lingxue and his wife had always been a sore point for Chu Yang. With Chu Yang's temper, unless he didn't agree to it, as long as he agreed to it, he would definitely do it. If he couldn't do it, he would always keep it in his heart and take it to heart. Now that he had finally resolved this matter, Chu Yang also heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing Yu Lingxue and his wife so excited that they were incoherent, Chu Yang also felt happy in his heart. Next, he naturally busied himself with improving his cultivation. To improve his cultivation, finding help was the most important thing. To find help, he also had to find someone who understood. The person that Chu Yang knew the most was naturally none other than the Great Sword Spirit. Sword Spirit, I need to quickly improve my strength now. What suggestions do you have? After Chu Yang went in, he asked very straightforwardly and cleanly. The Sword Spirit, who was still in a weakened state after the battle with the Dharma Supreme, rolled his eyes and said, "Quickly improve your strength? Taking heavy pills won't do? You still need to ask me about this?" Chu Yang bared his teeth and said, "Of course there's a reason for asking you. Although heavy pills are amazing, their healing effect is indeed the greatest. As for improving cultivation, at the level of a second-grade supreme martial artist, the effect isn't very great. So, it seems that taking heavy pills still won't be able to catch up with the progress I need. Is there a better medicine or method?" Chapter 1668. Chu Yang pursed his lips. "Do you think I want to? Who asked that damn Dharma Supreme to raise his strength to such an inhumane level? If we don't think of ways to raise our strength, are we just going to wait for death on the day of the final battle? Hurry up. Is there a shortcut for you to level up quickly?" The Sword Spirit pondered for a moment. Then he said, "The heavy pill is the most perfect medicine under the heavenly layer. It's impossible to find a more effective way to improve without any side effects. Even if there is, it's beyond the scope of the heavenly layer. So, it's not suitable for the present." Chu Yang was a little dumbfounded. "What do you mean? Is there no other way? Why did you drop the ball at such a crucial moment?" The Sword Spirit continued, "Don't be anxious. Novel chapters are updated the fastest. However, you can put more effort into the heavy pills. Back then, the medicinal herbs from the imperial court that Lord Z left behind, as well as the heavenly and earthly treasures from the other planes, should be able to achieve better results than ordinary heavy pills if they are combined properly." Chu Yang said, "In other words, a super version that surpasses the complete version? How much can it improve?" The Sword Spirit pondered for a moment and said, "To tell you the truth, the heavy pill's greatest effect is to revive the soul, extend the life, bring the dead back to life, heal injuries, improve one's physique and increase one's natural endowments. However, the effect of raising one's cultivation isn't very ideal. If we can improve it and fuse it with the huge medicinal strength, we can create a heavy pill that's specifically for raising one's cultivation. For example, the super heavy pill that we refined for Lord Z previously, if we make some improvements, the highest effect should be able to raise one's cultivation by at least 100 years. Cultivation was also divided into different levels. For example, the effects and results of a king-level expert's 100 years of cultivation and a supreme-level expert's 100 years of cultivation were undoubtedly worlds apart. For example, during this period of time, the former could at most absorb a small stone, while the latter could absorb an entire mountain. The gap was just that exaggerated. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the difference between heaven and earth. 100 years of cultivation in the supremacy realm? Chu Yang frowned. If that's the case, can he reach the pinnacle of middle-grade supreme being? The Sword Spirit smiled bitterly. "Lord Swordmaster, you're a high-level cultivator now, so why are you still saying such layman's words? These are two completely different concepts." The description of middle-grade Jizuan realm pinnacle was based on one's cultivation realm, while the increase in one's cultivation realm was based on one's years of cultivation and standard. Of course, there were also similarities between the two. It's definitely possible to advance to the next realm. If it can't, it'll only increase my cultivation by 100 years. Moreover, there have been so many low-grade supreme martial artists in history. Which one of them didn't take a small step forward after thousands of years of cultivation? This place is not like Tian-Ke, where the spiritual qi is 100 times more concentrated. You want to reach the peak in a mere 100 years? You are truly indulging in fantasy. I see. That makes sense. Chu Yang pondered and said, "How many super heavy pills can we refine with the medicines we have now?" I remember. Back then, when Big Sister Z left, we used up half of the medicines. Now that I think about it, we really didn't know how expensive the ingredients were back then. What a waste. The Sword Spirit did a rough calculation. Don't be too pessimistic. Actually, Some of the medicines have grown a lot in the tribulation space during this period of time. Currently, if we use them all up, together with a small amount of great elixirs, we should be able to refine 17 super heavy pills. I can't give you any more. Enough. Chu Yang made a prompt decision. Start refining immediately. Finish it as soon as possible. The higher the better. MNB, let's start. 17 super versions of heavy pills were enough for Chu Yang to greatly improve the strength of all his brothers at the same time. However, even if they improved, Chu Yang reckoned that it was still far from enough. It was just a mere 100 years of cultivation. If it was converted into actual combat power, how much could it improve? How could it be compared to the Dharma Supreme's tens of thousands of years of cultivation? There was no room for comparison at all. But then again, even if it was the super heavy pills plan that the sword spirit gave him, Chu Yang might not care too much. Because Chu Yang's goal this time wasn't here at all. His real goal was what that person said back then. In the tribulation space there is a gift that I left for you. This was what the mighty person who created the tribulation sword said to ZJ when his divine consciousness left the tribulation space. If there were other options, Chu Yang really didn't want to use them. ZJ had an inexplicable relationship with that mighty person and had even said that he wanted to challenge him. If he used his gift, it would be equivalent to owing him a favor. Even if that mighty person didn't care about this at all, and didn't care about the favor that Chu Yang owed him, a favor was still a favor. A debt was a debt. That mighty person didn't care about it didn't mean that Chu Yang didn't care about it. However, Chu Yang really had no other choice now. He could only pin his hopes on this. Owing a favor had to be repaid, but if he didn't think of a way to improve the strength of ZJ and his brothers now, the risk during the final battle would greatly increase. If he couldn't take care of everything now, how could he think about the future? If ZJ's guess was right, the things here were probably still unusable by ZJ now. But now he had no choice but to use them. Even if he couldn't use them, he had to take a risk. The Dharma Supreme's strength had increased greatly now, and the Enforcer's strength would definitely have increased considerably after demonization. Under such circumstances, ZJ's side would definitely lose. This was the final battle that concerned the future of all living beings in the Zhongtian. Defeat was equivalent to death. Therefore, Chu Yang had to do his best before the battle to raise his chances of winning to the maximum. He had to do his best, win or lose, and have no regrets in life or death. If he only had those 17 heavy pills, even if it wasn't a drop in the bucket to Chu Yang now, it was still too little. The ZJ brothers, Mo Qingwu and Mo Lei, would have to take 11 of them. Wu Jueqing and Chu Lur would also have to take 2 of them. Tan Tan didn't give them. Alright, just one sentence from Tian Tian was enough to make ZJ break down. Senior brother, am I handsome? Am I even more handsome today than yesterday? Tian Tian didn't need to say more than that. If he said that to ZJ's ears 180 times, Tan Tan would still be able to enjoy himself. On the other hand, ZJ would definitely be driven crazy. Also, should he give some to Feng and you? ZJ's family? Parents? Grandfather? He would have to use at least 3 more, right? He should at least leave 1 for Wu Qianshan, right? Tai Budian should also have 1, right? And ZJ's son, that little rascal, should at least have 1, right? 17 pills might seem like a lot, but once they were distributed it was really not enough. Who should he give them to? Chu Yang thought to himself. If 17 pills were to be reversed, it would be 70 pills, perhaps it would be barely enough to distribute. 17 pills was really not enough. Actually, even if there were 70 pills and it was enough to distribute, what was the actual effect? Collectively increasing one's cultivation by 100 years, 17 pills would be 1,700 years. 70 pills would only be 7,000 years. Compared to the Dharma Supreme, it was just a fraction of his cultivation. It was really not optimistic. If only there were 700 pills, then it would definitely be enough. Minister Chu was mumbling that it was not enough. At the side, the sword spirit, who was packing up the herbs and preparing to refine pills, rolled his eyes. His originally somewhat illusory figure almost disappeared in a trance. It was clear how shocked he was. I say, big brother, my dear big brother, your imagination is too wild. Even in the heavenly imperial court, this kind of divine medicine is hard to find. Even if only 1 pill appears, it can trigger a bloody battle between many forces in the heavenly imperial court. You have 17 pills all of a sudden and you think it's not enough? And you want 70 pills? 700 pills? What are you thinking? You can't be so greedy, right? Enough is enough. Chu Yang smiled embarrassedly. Look at you, I'm just thinking. The more good things, the better. The deep-rooted bad habits of humans are always like this. You have to think twice. Even the heavenly elixir of the heavenly imperial court is not as effective as the heavy elixir in terms of recovery ability. The sword spirit complained, "You have such unparalleled resources in the world and you're still complaining. Isn't this too much? What about elixirs that can improve cultivation?" Chuyang asked. The most important thing in elixirs is to be safe. If the elixir is not safe, no matter how great its medicinal efficacy is, you won't be able to absorb it. The result will be in vain. However, the heavy elixir does not have this drawback. In terms of safety, there is no elixir that can surpass the heavy elixir in the world. It's just that when it comes to improving cultivation, it depends on the basic quality of the elixir. This is really hard to say. The sword spirit said, "When you reach the heavenly imperial court and open the inheritance of the heavenly emperor of purple cloud, there will be many ways to improve cultivation." The heavenly emperor of purple cloud was recognized as the #1 alchemist in the heavenly imperial court. His elixir recipes are also the most miraculous in the heavenly imperial court. In fact, this is also one of the biggest reasons why the heavenly emperor of purple cloud, Zihao, rose so quickly in the heavenly imperial court. Of course, this is also the source of the jealousy and hatred of the other forces in the heavenly imperial court. This is also one of the main reasons why the heavenly emperor of purple cloud fought alone. The heavenly emperor of purple cloud rose so quickly in the heavenly imperial court as a wanderer in the pugilistic world. His speed is amazing. After tens of thousands of years, he became the heavenly emperor of purple cloud. Who doesn't fear him? Based on the situation at that time, if the heavenly emperor of purple cloud could continue to develop, I believe that it would not take long for the entire heavenly imperial court to be under his control. Not helping him back then is probably a kind of tacit agreement between the various forces. If the heavenly emperor of purple cloud defeated the extraterrestrial demon, he would become the savior and eternal master of the heavenly imperial court. So, the sword spirit's voice was a little strange, as if he was pointing at Shmi. Chapter 1669. Yes. Even now you have to keep it a secret. Even your brothers, don't let them know about it. After all, it's not a good thing to know too much about some things. Instead, it may harm them, the sword spirit warned solemnly. I understand. Isn't there a saying that ignorance is bliss? The complexity of the celestial imperial court, the greedy changes in people's hearts, and the various devious means are something that you people who have never been there can never imagine. The brighter the light behind it, the more boundless the haze. Sometimes, a single medicinal herb can cause countless deaths and injuries. A single spirit pill can cause too many battles. Even a careless glance can bring about a fatal disaster. A careless sentence can make you become the target of public criticism. Is this celestial imperial court actually so complicated? Chuyang asked curiously. Isn't there an unusually strict discipline or law there? Don't the celestial emperors restrict their subordinates? Of course there are restrictions. But, you can only know the details when you get there. Now, no matter what I say, I can't explain it clearly. The sword spirit sighed. Any high-level plane is an even more complicated place. This principle is the same no matter where it is. To give a simple example, take the lower three heavens for example. The upper echelons compete for power and wealth. In the lower three heavens they compete for territory. In the upper three heavens they compete for resources. In the lower three heavens, as long as you have money and power, you can do things. In the upper three heavens, if you have power and influence, you are the boss. In the upper three heavens, it becomes power, influence, wealth and resources. You also have to have connections. Otherwise, you can't even keep it. In the celestial imperial court, if your own power can't reach a certain level, you can only choose to develop in a low-key way. Power, influence, wealth, resources, everything. Then there's the matter inside. It's very troublesome. The sword spirit finished the last sentence with a sigh. The materials needed for refining elixirs had already been collected. After informing Chuyang, he went to refine the heavy elixirs. Chuyang sat in the tribulation space. His eyes flickered as he murmured, power, influence, wealth, resources. In the afternoon, Chuyang looked at Mo Tianji who had gathered in his room. Gu Duxing Ao Shiyun Xia Danqiong GMO Luo Kadi Dong Wushang and Mo Lei, Rui Butong and Mo Qing Wu, and the others made a total of 10 people. Boss, why did you call us here? GMO smiled. Is there something good to eat? Is there anything fun to do? Luo Kadi asked. Is there anything you want to discuss? This was Mo Tianji. Are you going to kill someone? This was Gu Duxing. Don't tell me you want me to play dead again? That's too difficult for me. Rui Badong said. Chu Yang had a headache. He decided to cut the Gordian knot. Stop right there. This time I called you because there's something important. As he spoke, he took out 10 new heavy pills and placed them on his palm. It rotated with a rumbling sound. A strange fragrance assailed his nostrils. He felt relaxed and happy. Luo Kadi's, Ji Mo's and Rui Butong's nostrils twitched rapidly. The sniffing sounds almost turned the narrow space into a vacuum. Smelled really good. Actually, it wasn't that others didn't want to do so. It was just that it was really too degrading. They couldn't bring themselves to do so. Being shameless was invincible. It was the same for taking advantage of others. As for GMO and the other two, they had long forgotten what shame was. Why would they care about this? What is this? Gu Duxing asked. Isn't it a heavy pill? Why does it feel a little different from before? This is a heavy pill, but it's a super heavy pill. Taking one can increase the cultivation of a supreme martial artist by 100 years. Chu Yang deliberately emphasized. Hiss, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. 100 years? Supreme martial artist cultivation? Increasing cultivation by 100 years and increasing the cultivation of a supreme martial artist by 100 years were two completely different things. A supreme martial artist wouldn't even bother to take a look at an ordinary martial artist's 100 years of cultivation. But this one pill could increase the cultivation of a supreme martial artist by 100 years out of thin air. What kind of concept was this? It was a little too shocking. Everyone takes one pill now. Take it immediately. Quickly absorb the medicinal effects as much as possible and do your best to improve your own cultivation and comprehension. In the face of a great enemy, every bit of improvement counts. Every bit of improvement means a greater chance of victory. At least you'll have a greater chance of survival, Chu Yang urged. The heavy pills in Chu Yang's hands slowly floated up and landed in everyone's palms. Mo Qingwu took the heavy pills and asked suspiciously, "Why are there only 10? What about yours?" "I've already taken mine." "Silly girl, can't you see that my aura is different now?" Chu Yang smiled warmly. Only Mo Qingwu was still thinking about Chu Yang wholeheartedly at this moment. If Chu Yang didn't have any, Mo Qingwu would definitely give her own to Chu Yang. It didn't matter if she took it or not as long as Chu Yang improved. Mo Qingwu's words made the other brothers blush. Because everyone was excited just now and didn't think of this. Everyone, don't be shy. Men are always a little careless. Mo Qingji smoothed things over. Not to mention, my sister is Chu Yang's wife. How can you compare? Just like Mo Lair's sister-in-law, she also ate it after seeing Dong Wuxiang eat it first. You're not women, how can you understand the deep feelings in this? Everyone burst into laughter. Mo Qingwu and Mo Lai both blushed. But while Mo Qingwu was shy, she was also a little happy. Originally, second brother was upset because of her and wanted to quarrel with Chu Yang when he saw him. But now he had accepted it. Just now he even said that she was Chu Yang's wife. This meant, what wife? That's so unpleasant to hear. Why don't you say that I'm your partner? How nice would that sound? The little girl pouted in her heart and rolled her eyes. But she didn't know that Mo Qingji was already making plans for his sister. What kind of woman could be called a wife by a man's side? That was the position of the legal wife. Only the legal wife could be called a wife. As for the others, they didn't count. At least they couldn't use the exclusive title of wife. Partner, confidant, and other titles couldn't be compared to the seemingly vulgar title of wife. Mo Qingji seemed to be joking and helping his brothers out of their predicament. But in fact, he had already confirmed Mo Qingwu's position as the big wife. Of course, Mo Qingji wouldn't be at ease. In the future he would still think of ways to help his sister. Yes, his sister was too honest. In the hands of Chu Yang, this playboy, if he didn't make plans for her, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. A brother-in-law is really tiring. A brother-in-law who loves his sister is even more tiring. Especially when he loves his sister and has to be the brother-in-law of someone like Chu Yang. That's tiring on top of tiring. If that's the case, should we call her sister-in-law in advance? Wahaha. GMO winked. Luo Kadi followed suit. Mo Qingwu rolled her eyes and said in a dignified manner, "Second brother Ji, don't tell me I don't dare to agree to you calling me sister-in-law? Go ahead and call me that. Why don't you call me that? See if I agree or not." Wow. This little girl is really thick-skinned. GMO was stunned for a long time before he said it. He almost choked. He really didn't call her sister-in-law. The others also looked at each other. They didn't expect this shy little girl, everyone's little sister, to be so brave today. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed. Jianghu also laughed. Does Senior Wu and Lur have a share? Mo Tianji laughed heartily. It seemed as if he had casually asked this question. Most men were careless, but Mo Tianji was definitely not one of them. This sentence was the best proof. Yes, why would I give them a share? I'll send it to them right away. However, Chu Yang didn't suspect anything and answered casually. After he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something. His eyes intentionally or unintentionally looked at Mo Tianji with a gaze that was guarding against perverts, just like the way Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang back then. However, Mo Tianji had already turned his head back. It seemed as if he had just casually asked that question. He chatted with his brothers for a while with a normal expression and swallowed the heavy pill in his hand. He was the last one to take the pill, even later than Mo Qinggu. He watched as everyone swallowed the heavy pill and sat cross-legged on the ground to practice, digesting the newly obtained huge medicinal effects without any distractions. Chu Yang completely covered his room with a supreme martial artist's divine sense cage. Then he walked out quietly. He walked to Chu Lur's door. Before he knocked, Chu Lur had already opened the door. Big brother? After dealing with the corpses these few days, Chu Lur already looked a lot calmer, as if she had gone through a lot. Facing the cycle of life and death one after another made this little girl mature exceptionally quickly. This level of maturity made Chu Yang's heart ache sometimes. Is Elder Wu here? Please come over for a while. I have something to tell you. Chu Yang said telepathically. Wu Jueqing walked over very quickly. What's the important matter? I'm just about to go out. You're going out? Chu Yang was stunned for a moment. What was he going out for when he wasn't regulating his breathing and waiting for the big battle to come? I'm going to look for the Dharma Supreme and give it one last try. Wu Jueqing's face was solemn as he said, we definitely won't be able to find him if we look for him openly. But if I go alone he might show up. If he can stop at this point, there's still a way to salvage the situation. At least we won't continue to suffer. Chapter 1670. Chu Yang said earnestly, besides, the great clans have already been massacred. The Dharma Supreme can't stop even if he wants to. It's too late to rein in the horse near the cliff, too late to mend the leak. Wu Jueqing sighed. How can I not know the risks of this trip? But if this goes on, it will really be too out of control. The entire continent is on the brink of destruction. What does my personal safety matter? This life of mine was saved in the first place. It's my duty to protect the world. Even if there's only a glimmer of hope, it's still worth fighting for. Chu Yang said, I understand what Elder means. But if Elder Wu still insists on going, it's better for you to take this elixir before going. Elixir? What elixir? What elixir is there to take at this point? Asked Wu Jueqing. Heavy elixir. Chu Yang said seriously, I know that heavy elixirs are not unfamiliar to Elder. But what I'm giving you this time is different from what Elder Wu has taken before. The previous heavy elixirs were more focused on recovery. Now, this heavy elixir can increase Elder Wu's current cultivation level by 100 years. There's actually such a miraculous elixir? Wu Jueqing's eyes lit up. Since that's the case, why would an old man like me need to take such a miraculous elixir? Why don't I give it all to Lur? She's still weak and can use it to improve herself. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Lur taking one is already her limit. I'm afraid she still needs Elder Wu to help her tidy up her meridians. Although Lur's talent is outstanding, she's after all only at the peak of supreme martial artist level. Not even 7th grade yet. The effect of this elixir is still a little too strong for her. She needs Elder's help. Besides, there's no benefit in taking more of this elixir. If Lur needs it in the future, I'll just refine more for her. I'm still not stingy towards my own sister. Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said, there's one more thing. If I'm not wrong, after this battle, we'll probably have to leave the heavens. When that time comes, Elder Wu will have to go to the heavens to increase his strength. Prepare to meet your brothers. With Elder's current cultivation level, I'm afraid. Before Chu Yang finished, Wu Jueqing was already completely convinced. No need to say any more. I'll take it. The battle is imminent, every bit of improvement I can. After dealing with Wu Jueqing, Chu Yang didn't stay for long. He went on to look for the Moon Breeze couple. Of course, in order to avoid the possibility that the Moon Breeze couple was still busy sparring, or, cough cough, that Chu Yang had already started coughing from afar. Cough cough cough, cough cough, cough cough, cough cough cough, cough cough, cough cough. He coughed with every step. When he reached the door, Yu Lingxue had already opened the door with his handsome face flushed red. He hurriedly complained, "If you're already here, then so be it. Why are you coughing so hard? Are you sick?" Even his coughing sounds weird and it's filled with a lewd smell. Feng Yuro's face was also flushed red. Obviously, the couple knew what Chu Yang was worried about. In the face of such an awkward situation, Chu Yang could only rub his nose and smile bitterly. "Fine, I had good intentions, but now you're saying that I'm sick." His mouth was filled with a lewd taste and even his coughs were lewd. "I really don't know where you heard the lewd sound from. Your ears are really different." Chu Yang wanted to retort, but Feng Yuro was right beside him. How could he be so presumptuous? He could only take his pride into consideration and swallow this loss. After exchanging some pleasantries, he went straight to the point and stated the purpose of his visit. However, to Chu Yang's surprise, the Moon Breeze couple frankly refused to take it. Staring at the two heavy pills in Chu Yang's hands, which were enough to make all the martial artists in the world go crazy, Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro had complicated expressions. "The two of us can't take this anymore." "Why?" Chu Yang was very surprised. "So many people dream of having good things but can't get. I've already given them to you and you're actually rejecting me? What's going on?" "Sword Master Chu, there's something you don't know. In fact, our cultivation has already reached the limit of the heavenly realm. If we really want to, we're very confident of breaking through. If we really take this heavy pill now and suddenly gain new strength, it's very likely that we'll automatically break through the bottleneck and reach Ning Tianya's level. By then, even if we don't want to break through the void and leave this realm, it'll be impossible." Yu Lingxue smiled gently and said, "But we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave this heavenly realm. This is also the biggest reason why we've never taken that last step." At this point, the couple looked at each other. In their eyes, there was an indescribable longing and unwillingness to part with each other. The two of them secretly held each other's hands. Obviously, this was a decision made by both of them. In terms of personal desires, we've received Sword Master Chu's help and generously gave us the spring of life. Our long-cherished wish has come true. Now we're preparing to have a child and pass on the legacy of the Moon Breeze couple. If possible, maybe. Yu Lingxue's face was a little red, but he still said it openly. Feng Yuro, who was at the side, was also blushing. She listened to Yu Lingxue's words with unusual gentleness. "We want to raise the child and watch him grow up bit by bit. As parents, it's a little irresponsible of us to enter the chaotic martial world like the Heavenly Palace at this time, where we can't even protect ourselves." Yu Lingxue smiled and said, "For the sake of our child, we must also give him a stable environment to grow up in. Let him grow up smoothly, start a family and have children. Therefore, we've decided not to go to the Heavenly Palace. At least, we won't consider taking that last step in the short term. As for the second reason, the great battle is imminent. Success depends on man, but victory or defeat depends on the heavens. After this battle, if we lose, then everyone will die together. It doesn't matter whether we go to the Heavenly Palace or not. But if we win, then after the whole world has gone through this catastrophe, even if the main culprit is gone, it'll be a scene of devastation." Yu Lingxue said affectionately, "For this continent, we've once guarded it for more than 10,000 years. We really can't let go of such a devastated continent. After this battle, you have more important things to do. Obviously, it's impossible for you to stay and clean up this mess. Since that's the case, we, husband and wife, are duty-bound to take on this responsibility. And we've always thought that this should be our responsibility," Yu Lingxue said resolutely. "We want this continent to return to its former bright blue sky. Let this continent return to peace and tranquility, even more peaceful and joyful than before." Chu Yang left the Moon Breeze couple's room with heartfelt reverence. He only left behind a promise, a very solemn promise. That was Yu Lingxue's request. "It's impossible for our generation to go up there. But, if our child is successful in the future and has the opportunity to break through the limit and go to the Heavenly Palace, I hope that Sword Master Chu will take care of him on account of our friendship." To this, Chu Yang's reply was, "If such a day really comes, I'll definitely do it. I'll definitely not let my old friend suffer any grievances." Chu Yang considered for a long time and finally decided to give Ling Muyang a super heavy pill. Chu Yang still found Ling Muyang very pleasing to the eye. Just the fact that he had a clear conscience in his 10,000 years in the martial world was worth a heavy pill. And it could be said that there were no so-called big clans now, so there was no such thing as an enemy of sword masters. Everyone was fighting for a common enemy. Chu Yang couldn't be stingy with this empty promise. Ling Muyang was so excited about the pill that tears almost flowed out of his eyes. With this medicinal pill, Ling Muyang would definitely be able to break through the bottleneck and take the final step to surpass the boundaries of the heavens. He would be able to enter the heavenly imperial court that martial artists yearned for even in their dreams, and he would even be able to search for traces of his father along the way. And this point was also the thing that Ling Muyang was most concerned about in his entire life. When he came out of Ling Muyang's room, he was stopped by Tan Tan. The two of them almost came to blows on the spot and broke off all relations. Tan Tan shamelessly demanded an exorbitant price. "I want 10 pills. We're brothers, you can at least give me this, right?" Chu Yang almost fainted from anger. "No. Get lost immediately. 10 pills, you think they're cabbages? The minimum is 8. You can't give me any less. I'll get angry if you give me any less. 1 pill at most. You can get angry. I'm telling you, I have a bad temper. I'll fall out with you if you give me less than 7 pills. 1 pill at most. Fall out with me. I don't have much patience. You can kill me if I give you less than 1 pill. 1 pill. I'll pull out my sword if you want to die. Fuck. 3 pills should be enough, right? We grew up together naked. When we were young, we stood by the river and competed to see who could pee further. Such a deep friendship. Blood brothers. Only 1 pill. Get lost. Don't try to get close to me. You're ruthless. You're ruthless. Itchy, you're actually calling me old? You're awesome. I'm telling you, you bastard, 2 pills. 2 pills should be enough, right? I've already retreated a dozen steps. You should give me face. I'll ask you 10,000 times a day if you don't give me 2 pills. I won't be a human if I don't ask you once. You're not a human. Cut the crap. Is that okay? Give me a straight answer. Are you threatening me? My most handsome and elegant senior brother, I admire you the most in this generation of mine. How would I dare to threaten you? Boo-hoo, I'm really going to cry. How about I massage your back and shoulders for you? Just 2 pills. Deal. Fuck, you've wasted so much of my saliva. Just 2 pills. Just you wait, when you get married, I'll tear off your roof on the night of your wedding night. Fuck, I swear I won't be a human if I don't take revenge for this. Tan Tan took the heavy pills and immediately turned hostile. He took the 2 heavy pills and left while cursing. His face was full of dissatisfaction. Chu Yang frowned as he calculated. He hadn't divided the 17 heavy pills yet. Now there was only 1 left. Chapter 1671. Chu Yang had a headache. Not only did he lose the share that he intended to leave for Tai Budian, Wu Chanshan and his parents, but he also had to guard against Tan Tan's sneak attacks. Based on Chu Yang's understanding of Tan Tan, this 3-star Saint King was definitely capable of such despicable means. Sigh, I can only think of a way in the future. With a heart full of helplessness, he met a few people. Huang Xiaoyou, a few experts from the Huang clan, a few experts from the Ling clan, and Ling Hanxue. Regardless of gender, they were all looking at him with an extremely resentful gaze. Ling Hanxue was still alright. After all, she was a woman. But as for the rest, they were all men. Making such resentful expressions was really too frustrating, but now he really didn't have any. Forget about the others, but Huang Xiaoyou, you're also resentful. Giving you some dregs can make you explode. What's there to be resentful about? Chu Yang shuddered and walked away. Once again he returned to his room. At this time, among the few brothers inside, Gu Duxing, whose real strength was vaguely the strongest, had already finished absorbing the medicinal effect and was guarding the brothers. How's the improvement? Chu Yang quietly walked in and asked Gu Duxing via telepathy, for fear of disturbing everyone's cultivation. Very good. It's greatly exceeded my original expectations. Gu Duxing excitedly said via telepathy, I was originally a junior supreme martial artist. But after taking this medicine, I've now reached the peak of the junior supreme martial artist level. I even have a feeling that I can enter the higher supreme martial artist level at any time. The bottleneck of the higher supreme martial artist level no longer exists. That's good. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. The effects mentioned by the sword spirit were only theoretical. The actual effect was still unknown. Although he had taken it before, his improvement was not obvious. Although the effects of his own improvement were obvious, it wasn't that great. But now, the shocking effects of the super heavy pill had been greatly reflected in Gu Duxing's body. His chances of winning the decisive battle in the future had naturally increased by a few notches. Then he said, I'll take this opportunity to go into seclusion for a while. After everyone has finished absorbing the medicinal effect, please guard me. Before I wake up on my own, no one is to disturb me no matter what. Gu Duxing nodded in agreement. Chu Yang took a deep breath and entered the inner room of the room. Then he entered the tribulation space. Since the elixir was effective, then I'll try to open the seal and see if I can get something out of it. It would be best if it was something that could help him and his brothers in their cultivation. Otherwise, this battle would not be optimistic. Are you sure you want what's inside? The sword spirit sucked in a breath of cold air. I'm afraid that the thing inside is no small matter. If you want to forcefully open it, I'm afraid that even an emperor wouldn't be able to do so. Chu Yang's face darkened. We're in a critical period right now. He had to try his best to open it. Even if I can only open it once with all my might, it's enough. The current situation is very unfavorable. If we can't improve further, it will be very difficult for us to win this battle. I'm afraid that we will be in danger of being completely wiped out. If that's the case, then the Chongtian continent is finished. The Dharma Supreme will definitely not stop his plan to destroy the world. If the heavens cannot bear such consequences, neither can we. But, there's no but now. Chu Yang said resolutely, no matter what. He had to open that seal no matter the cost. After opening it, whether or not the thing inside can be used is one thing. But we can't give up on this hope before we try. Seize this last chance and try your best. Bring me there. Chu Yang ordered. The sword spirit was extremely helpless. With a frown, he brought Chu Yang to a corner of the tribulation space. This place looked no different from any other place. Hazy mist shrouded the edges. Obviously, this was where the barrier of the tribulation space was. Is this the place? Chu Yang reached out and touched it. However, his finger directly touched a piece of mysterious flexibility. It was the spatial wall. This is the place. The sword spirit nodded affirmatively. Chu Yang was a little dizzy. It seems that I can't even find where the seal is. How can I talk about breaking it? Breaking this seal doesn't require force. Instead, it requires mental strength. As long as you focus your mental strength, you can see the seal. The sword spirit said, but I'll say this first. This seal is very powerful. Moreover, because breaking the seal requires mental strength to attack the seal, if you fail, you will have to bear the consequences of mental strength backlash. In other words, if you fail, you will have to bear the full force of mental strength backlash. It's like you punching yourself and it's a full force punch. Chu Yang grinned. He felt cold sweat dripping down his spine. This thing was easy to say. However, punching yourself with all your strength was definitely not a good feeling. Not only was it not a good feeling, but it was also very uncomfortable. And it was a mental strength backlash. He really didn't want to relive the previous painful experience. It would definitely be like a trip to the 18 levels of hell. Unfortunately, Chu Yang didn't have much choice now. Even if it was a painful experience, he had to try it. So be it, because if it didn't work, he would have to start a real tour of hell. Standing in front of the seal, Chu Yang took a deep breath and adjusted his spiritual power to its optimal state. Then he began to circulate it with all his might. After a while, he suddenly focused his mental strength in his eyes and looked forward. Right in front of his eyes, an almost transparent barrier slowly appeared out of thin air. Behind this barrier he could faintly see a lot of fruits piled up inside. They were arranged in a disorderly manner. The person who placed these things clearly didn't treat these fruits as anything good. He just casually threw them in. He didn't consider that the irregular arrangement would affect the fruits themselves. Seeing this situation, Chu Yang felt a burst of heartache. At the same time, he was overjoyed. First, since the other party didn't value these fruits very much, the seal might not be very formal. This was undoubtedly a good sign for him. Maybe he could open it right away? Second, since these were fruits, then these fruits themselves must be heavenly treasures. Since they were heavenly treasures, then they must have the effect of increasing cultivation. He believed that this wouldn't be a waste of effort. Things that the other party didn't value were very rare now. Looking as far as the eye could see, each of those fruits was surrounded by a hazy halo. Just based on this point alone, all the heavenly treasures in the Chongtian continent did not have such a peculiar phenomenon. This was enough to explain the degree of extraordinariness of these fruits. The problem now was how to take them out. He hoped that the other party really didn't value them. That way they wouldn't set up a strong seal. At this point he could only work hard to move forward. Chu Yang made up his mind. He separated a tentacle of his mental strength and extended it toward the seal. Just as he got close to this almost transparent seal, he felt a sense of powerlessness that couldn't be shaken at all. But fortunately he didn't suffer any backlash. Chu Yang gradually increased the intensity of his mental strength, but the feeling was the same from beginning to end. There was no effect at all. The intensity of his mental strength gradually climbed to the limit of Chu Yang's body, but he still couldn't break the seal. Chu Yang tried every way but there was no progress. In desperation he gathered all his mental strength at one point and rushed forward. He wanted to use the heaven and earth strike, hoping for a fluke. Puff. Bang. Minister Chu was immediately hit by an extremely strong rebounding force. Then he flew out like he was riding on a cloud. Chu Yang was hit by the recoil of the seal. He lay on the ground and didn't get up for a long time. For a moment he was in so much pain that he couldn't even make a sound. He could only roll back and forth on the ground. It was the kind of rolling that used up all his strength and his whole body was completely tense. After a long time he finally managed to catch his breath. He held his head and moaned, "Oda? Well, fuck him." The recoil this time was really not light. The recoil of Chu Yang's mental strength, if converted to martial strength, was almost equivalent to the full force punch of the #1 expert of the heavenly layer, Ning Tianya. After all, Chu Yang's mental strength was almost the #1 in the heavenly layer. Even the current Dharma Supreme couldn't be compared to him. So how could this recoil be easy to bear? When Chu Yang struggled to stand up, he still felt extremely weak all over. He was actually sweating from the pain and was close to dehydration. The recoil of mental strength didn't only affect the brain and divine sense. It also had a considerable impact on the physical body. After gulping down a few mouthfuls of the spring of life, he felt slightly better. Looking at the seal that still seemed to have nothing, Chu Yang felt a lingering fear. In the past, he didn't know what it meant to be a mantis trying to stop a chariot or a mayfly trying to shake a mountain. Today he completely understood. There was no wavering at all. What should he do? There was obviously a treasure mountain in front of him, but he didn't have the means to open it. "Why don't you give up?" The sword spirit advised. "This isn't a seal that you can open now. If you force yourself to try, it will only cause damage to yourself. The battle is imminent. If you are not in your best condition, it will be more disadvantageous for the future battle. And the greater the impact, the stronger the recoil. If something goes wrong, I'm afraid." Chu Yang shook his head. "I understand. If something goes wrong, it may cause me to have a mental breakdown or even become a zombie. But if I give up now, it's equivalent to giving up this battle and the lives of my brothers. How can I give up? Using my life to exchange for the lives of my brothers, this gamble is worth it. I'll give it my all." Chu Yang took a deep breath and stood in front of the seal once again. His mental strength was activated again and attacked the seal. Then there was another scream. Chu Yang was thrown out again. This time it was even worse. Chapter 1672. Chu Yang only felt that his brain had turned into pieces of tofu dregs. Stars were flying in front of his eyes, as if countless universes had appeared. After a long time, he stood up and tried again. Chu Yang's previous guess was right. Every time he suffered a backlash, it was comparable to the 18 levels of hell. Such a painful feeling. If it were someone else, they would rather die than experience it a second time. But Chu Yang would definitely not give up. Even if it was 10 times, 100 times. Because he knew that this was where the hope of this battle lay. It was also where the greatest hope for the survival of his brothers lay. If he couldn't open this place, there was absolutely no chance of winning this battle. Just when Chu Yang used his spiritual energy to attack the seal for the first time. In a place that was unknown how far away. A white-clothed youth was standing on top of a majestic mountain with 8 extremely beautiful women. In front of them was an ancient but extremely majestic strange city wall, winding between the mountains. Looking around, the landscape was picturesque. This is my hometown. Every time I see the Dragon City, my heart is always surging. I can't control myself. The young man in white looked at the vast land under his feet with clear and affectionate eyes. A graceful woman in white came in front of him. On her dazzlingly beautiful face, there was a trace of a smile. This place is indeed very good. And whether it's the local customs or the beautiful scenery, it's much better than most of the places we've seen, another beautiful woman said excitedly. Why don't we stay here for a while? Let's take a break for a while. Let's change our mood. It can also satisfy our husband's homesickness. Good idea. The women clapped together, expressing their agreement. The young man in white tilted his head and thought for a while. He said, "This is also good. But I'll first go and see what people wear now. It's better to play around here. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. We can't be too shocking, right?" Okay. However, the nearest city below seems to be very lively. I can hear the sound of firecrackers. The woman in white who had spoken earlier tilted her head to listen and said, "It seems to be a big day. Many people are setting off firecrackers. It's actually some university? What kind of people are admitted to some university? It seems to be very fun. And this university, what is it? Do you remember the academies in our hometown?" The white-clothed youth said excitedly, "The universities here are probably the local names of those academies. However, there are no martial skills taught here. But you can learn a lot of other things even though you might not be able to use them. Is that so? Does it sound interesting?" The girls were all excited. "Why don't we go to school and role-play?" The young man in white smiled evilly. "Good idea, good idea." The girls cheered and expressed their approval. "Go. Let's go down and get a feel of the situation first, then we'll go to school." The white-clothed youth laughed and stood up. "Let's do it." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly felt a spiritual fluctuation, and he couldn't help but frown. He immediately understood what had happened. He frowned and muttered, "What is that little guy doing? You're not afraid to die again and again. Do you want to play yourself to death?" "That little guy?" the girls asked with interest. "The one in the double sky continent. It's really annoying. I'm in high spirits and want to do something. I haven't been in such a good mood for many years." The white-clothed youth twitched his mouth. "This little guy is the kind of person who won't turn back even if he hits the south wall. He must break the south wall. Well, since he's playing with his life so hard, I won't waste any more time on him. Let him go in once." As he spoke, he snapped his fingers and muttered, "You can only eat the yellow one. You can only take one. If you're too greedy and die, don't blame me." Then he stood up and laughed. "Wives, let's go to school. At the same time, I'll let you see my favorite colorful world." With a burst of cheers, the girls followed him all the way. It was as if beautiful clouds were floating in the sky. In the tribulation space, Chu Yang was still persistently attacking the seal. It seemed as if he wouldn't stop until he broke through the seal. Suddenly, the power of the seal disappeared. Chu Yang was caught off guard. He stumbled and rushed in like a bull. He almost rushed to the top of those fruits. For a moment, his eyes were wide open. Outside, the sword spirit also opened his eyes wide. "What's going on? How is it possible? He really broke it? Wow. Sword Master can't be so fierce, right? He can even break the seal set by that powerful person? This is really amazing." At the same time, a voice sounded in Chu Yang's mind. "Little guy, do you want to die? Even if you want to die, you don't have to do it in such a painful way, right?" Before Chu Yang could speak, the voice said, "Well, I have something important to do now, so I won't waste time with you. This time I'll make an exception and let you in. But remember, if you want to go in the future, you have to wait until you're strong enough. If you're not strong enough, you can't go in even if you kill yourself. This is the only time I'll give you preferential treatment. There won't be a next time. You're only allowed to take the yellow ones. You're only allowed to take one. You're not allowed to take more. If you're too greedy, don't blame me." Then the voice disappeared again. Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that it wasn't his sincerity that could move metal and stone. It was the other party who made an exception for him. That's right. Based on my previous experience, my successful breakthrough this time was a little too unusual. I had to face reality and admit the gap between us. However, it's rare for me to come in. Why am I only allowed to take one? Isn't this too much of a pity? Looking around, he saw that there were two kinds of fruits. One was yellow and was piled up outside. There were a lot of them. It was the kind that allowed one to take one. The other was black, but there were only two of them. They were arranged in a row inside. As for the innermost part, there was a sword floating in the air. Chu Yang stretched out his hand and grabbed a yellow fruit. He wanted to try to grab a second one and see what these things were. But an extremely pure and terrifyingly huge energy suddenly emerged from the fruit in his hand. Chu Yang was sent flying by this energy and tumbled a dozen times in a row. He squatted down on the ground and with a bang, a purple crystal was smashed into pieces by him. Minister Chu's expression was strange. He wanted to cry but had no tears. But his butt had really cracked and was dripping with blood. As for the seal in front of him, it had disappeared again. Chu Yang knew that this time, it wouldn't be opened a second time. At least, before he was strong enough, he wouldn't be able to open it. Even if he really killed himself, it would be useless. But looking at his hand, he was a little depressed. Is this fruit enough? But how can that fruit be so powerful? What kind of fruit is this? While Chu Yang was in doubt, the sword spirit had already rushed over. His eyes were wide open. You took it out. You actually managed to break the seal. That person took the initiative to let me in? Chu Yang rolled his eyes. What do you mean I broke the seal? I'm still far from it. It was rare for him to say something like this. He wasn't bragging. Huh? The sword spirit was at a loss. This time I said that I was risking my life. I wasn't risking my life to break the seal. I was risking my life to try and break the seal. I was betting that he would eventually let me in. Do you understand? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, he's so busy and lazy. He certainly won't be able to endure my repeated attacks. This place will open as long as he's annoyed. Otherwise, why would I risk my life? Don't I know that I don't have the ability to open the seal? Then he sighed and said, but after this time, it will be impossible for me to use such a trick to go in again. Let's not talk about whether he'll agree or not. I'll look down on myself if I use such a trick again. The sword spirit was stunned. So, this guy acted as if he was risking his life, to use a trick? Suddenly, the sword spirit had a new understanding of the sword master's craftiness. Let's talk about something serious. What did you take out? The sword spirit tactfully changed the topic. Wait a minute. Chu Yang said angrily, let me take a breather first. Do you think that I was faking it when I tried to break the seal so many times? Although what I did was just a cheap trick, I was truly risking my life. It really hurts. Why can't the heavy pill heal the wound on my butt? The sword spirit curled his lips. That almighty person looks like a bad-tempered person. He's only making your butt bleed. He's already very merciful that he didn't permanently cripple your butt. Moreover, he wants to punish you. What kind of punishment would it be if the heavy pill was effective? After a long time, Chu Yang struggled to stand up. He twisted his body and looked at his bloody back. He wanted to cry but had no tears. How can I wear clothes like this? But how can I not wear clothes? Sigh, I don't want to talk about it. It's all tears. He finally had the time to look at the fruit in his hand. He saw a strange-shaped fruit in his hand. The reason why it was said to be strangely shaped was because if this fruit was placed from a distance, no matter which side it was viewed from, it would still be round. Even when he held it in front of his eyes would tell him, this fruit is round. Isn't it normal for a fruit to be round? But the feeling of holding it in his hand told him that this fruit wasn't round. Instead, it was completely square in shape. It looked like a square cube. The edges of its overall appearance were as neat as a knife. Chu Yang couldn't help but gasp in amazement. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.